Chapter 1658. The void was turbulent and the sound was like thunder. A scarlet lotus throne of nether god evolved into a palm print, but it set off a terrible Taoist light storm, raging in the divine battlefield. As soon as this move was made, all the old monsters could not remain calm. Was this the power that a true saint could possess? It was too shocking. Lin Sun looked neither sad nor happy and punched out. In an instant, the boundless saint's spirit roared out from his body, and endless divine light illuminated the sky. It was just like a great furnace showing a scene of chaos. Boom! The sky and earth shook, and the sun and moon lost their light. It was visible to the naked eye that wherever Lin Sun's fist passed, there was nothing that could not be destroyed, unstoppable and unmatched. How terrifying and heaven-defying Ming Child's strongest blow was, but in front of this punch, it was forcibly blasted away. Crack! The nether god's lotus platform that was scarlet red like blood suddenly exploded apart like a piece of paper. Under the shocked gazes of all the old monsters, the power of this punch violently blasted Ming Zi's entire body away. With a puff, Ming Child's mouth and nose spurted blood, and the clothes on his chest were torn, revealing a dark blue armor with secret patterns. This should be an ancient treasure with amazing defensive power, but at this time, there was a fist mark on the armor, and there were signs of cracking. It could be foreseen that if it were not for this armor, Ming Child would have suffered more serious injuries this time. In other words, Lin Sun's punch not only defeated Ming Child's strongest blow, but also blasted him away and injured him. There was a dead silence in the field. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and the others were all in a trance. Although they were quasi-emperors with rich experience, when had they ever seen such an invincible battle at the peak? The invincible method that Ming Child had displayed before was already terrifying and unimaginable. Who would have thought that Lin Sun was even worse? My little friend Lin Sun is really amazing. Ming Child created his own method recently, and it is certain that Lin Sun should have entered this realm earlier. Compared to them, we were far too inferior back then. For a time, the old monster's mood fluctuated, some with emotion, some with amazement. Two members of the younger generation, one stronger than the other, and the other more vigorous and powerful than the other, caused their horizons to be broadened, and their inherent understanding of the past was on the verge of being overturned. Impossible! How can there be such a technique in this world? At this moment, the Ming Child's face was pale and hideous. His face was filled with disbelief. Lin Sun's strike was like a heavy hammer, smashing the pride and confidence in Ming Child's heart to the verge of collapse. He couldn't imagine that Lin Sun had already set foot on the road to the invincible realm of the true saint long before him, and the method he created was so terrifying. Ignorant! You created your own technique and only have your own invincible foundation. You want to be invincible among all the saints in the world? You're not qualified. Lin Sun's voice was indifferent and his black eyes were cold. As he spoke, he'd already moved through the air and launched a slaughter. Up until this point in the battle, he'd completely figured out the resources of the Dark Child, and there was no need to continue delaying this battle. Boom! Lin Sun's body was like a furnace, pointing to the sky and hitting the earth. Every blow had the power to melt all the Tao. T. Who do you think you are to have the qualifications to teach me? The Dark Child was furious. He charged over. His might was still as terrifying as before. Only, what was different from before was that the situation had already been completely reversed. No matter how many techniques he used, how many Tao techniques he used, they were all crushed like bubbles. The feeling he gave others was like an ant trying to shake a tree. It was because right now Lin Sun seemed like he was truly invincible. Every single move he made carried a great momentum that could suppress the ages. The furnace was like his body, its might able to suppress all enemies of this level from past to present. After 10 breaths of time, the Dark Child was suppressed to the point he couldn't even raise his head. He coughed out blood repeatedly, his face deathly pale, hair disheveled. 30 breaths of time later. Along with deafening explosions, the dark green armor that protected the dark child's body suddenly exploded, turning into fragments that shot out in all directions. During this process, Lin Sun pushed forward, his might piercing through the heavens. Those old monsters all looked at each other in dismay, gasping endlessly. Only now did they deeply realize how extraordinary this youngster sent to Imperial Pass by the divine secret pavilion was. What was laughable was that in the beginning, they actually didn't pay attention to him, completely ignoring him. "I'm going to fight you to the death." In the Devil God arena, the disheveled dark child went completely mad. His eyes felt like they were splitting apart from rage, and he charged forward without any regard for anything else. Many years ago, in absolute nightmare domain, he suffered miserable defeats at Lin Sun's hands many times in succession. Every single time, his dignity was trampled on, he had no face left, he was humiliated to the extreme. If it wasn't for the god's smelting pot, he would have died who knew how many times over. It was precisely because of this that during these years, he cultivated madly in Imperial Pass precisely for the sake of revenge. He wanted to recover all the dignity he lost and the face he lost. However, who would have expected that in this battle, even though he'd already created his own technique, he would still suffer setbacks time and time again. How could the dark child endure this? Clang! The pitch-black Avicii sword that surged with roiling demonic mist swept out. Sword energy surged, and a terrifying scene of purgatory appeared in all directions. "Kill!" the dark child roared, his expression savage and warped. "This is my spoils of war, how can it be used by you? Hand it over." Lin Sun's words were casual. With a raise of his hand, the mysteries of the lower tyrant restrictions spread through heaven and earth. With a so sound, the Avicii sword seemed to have been imprisoned, sucked into Lin Sun's palm, putting it away. "You..." The dark child was angered to the point he almost vomited blood. He suddenly released a long roar, like a mad evil god. The great dark prison seal appeared in his palm. 1. The 36 levels of purgatory world condensed in the void, the atmosphere solemn. In just an instant it was blasted apart by a single punch from Lin Sun, domineering to a ridiculous degree. "This seal isn't bad, hand it over as well." While laughing loudly, Lin Sun suddenly grabbed out. It was as if a true dragon reached out a giant claw from the clouds, releasing a terrifying and boundless devouring force. In that instant, the great dark prison seal was also taken away, its connection with the dark child severed, put away by Lin Sun. He walked through the void, his gaze as if he was staring at a money tree. He said with a smile, "Come, come, come. What other treasures do you have? Feel free to use them." Pooh! The dark child was so angry that he directly coughed up blood, his body trembling. He gritted his teeth and roared, "Lin Sun, you've gone too far. I want you dead." He waved his sleeve, and a blood-colored edict swept out. This edict was extremely strange. It was like gold but not gold like jade. It was only half a foot long, and its surface was surging with dense blood-colored Taoist patterns that looked like earthworms. As soon as it appeared, a thick bloody aura that was enough to make detestable spread out, dyeing the void into an oppressive blood-colored color. Holy blood talisman. An old monster was shocked and shouted, "Little friend, hide." The other old monsters also turned pale. This decree was a taboo item of the Blood River Nether tribe. In order to refine such a decree, one needed the complete skin of a great sage, the heart blood of 3,000 sages, and the soul remnants of tens of thousands of ancient heroic spirits. The great saint's skin had the essence of big. After refining, it could turn into a blank edict. The heart blood of the saints and the remnant souls of ancient heroes were the source of power for drawing the edict. Such a treasure was completely an evil treasure that angered both gods and men. It was too bloody and cruel, and it wasn't tolerated by the people of the world. After the dark blood Nether Emperor headed to the ancient path in the starry sky, the method to refine this treasure was taken away, and it wasn't passed down. But no one had imagined that the Nether Child would actually possess such a terrifying edict that could cause even saints to turn pale at the mention of it. Some old monsters couldn't restrain themselves from making a move. But right at this moment, Lin Sun suddenly withdrew a pagoda that seemed as if it was constructed from divine gold in a composed manner. The pagoda soared through the sky with a boundless and ancient aura, and strands of dark gold light shot out explosively like ropes. The Great Tao Everlasting Pagoda! The blood-colored edict didn't even have the chance to display its might before it was suppressed and sealed by layers of dark gold light, and then it was instantly taken into the Great Tao Everlasting Pagoda. The Nether Child was first stunned, and then his eyes opened wide in disbelief. After that, he flew into a rage, and he was furious to the point his hair stood on end, and he was on the verge of going mad. The Holy Blood Talisman was left behind by his ancestor, the Dark Blood Nether Emperor, and there was only one of it in the entire ancient Desolation region. It was impossible for there to be a second one in the future. Who would have imagined that it wouldn't even have the chance to release its might before it was taken away directly? All the old monsters felt dizzy. When the Holy Blood Talisman appeared earlier, it shocked them, and they felt that the situation was serious. But in the blink of an eye, it was actually taken away by Lin Sun again. This seemed to be too unbelievable. The Nether Child has numerous treasures in his possession, but it's very obvious that Lin Sun doesn't lack miraculous and unfathomable treasures. Just like that pagoda, its aura is mysterious, its atmosphere is magnificent, and its momentum is lofty. It's absolutely far from being comparable to a saint treasure in the world. I even suspect that it isn't a saint treasure at all. Ling Xiaozi's eyes flickered, and he was visibly moved. Anything else? Continue. In the divinity arena, Lin Sun smiled as he put away the pagoda, and he spoke as if he wished to continue. You, the Nether Child was furious to the point he saw stars, and his face turned green. What does Lin Sun think I am? A boy of wealth? I remember that you still have a god-smelting gourd, right? Quickly take it out, or you'll have to kneel on the ground and slap your own face this time. Lin Sun smiled warmly, and he seemed to be earnestly instructing and advising Ling Xiaozi with kind words. All the old freaks had strange expressions. This kid Lin Sun looks modest, polite, and harmless, yet they never imagined that he would be so black-hearted. He obviously intended to take the Nether Child as a fat sheep to be slaughtered. Lin Sun, you're courting death. Rumble. Suddenly, the Nether Child's body expanded abruptly, and he transformed into a blood mosquito that was 300 meters in size and had 16 pairs of wings. A strand of monstrous ferocious aura suffused out along with it. This was the Nether Child's main body. Obviously, he'd been forced into a corner, and he disregarded everything to fight Lin Sun with his life. However, this sort of struggle was bound to be futile. In merely a short moment, under Lin Sun's ceaseless attacks, the enormous body of the Nether Child was beaten to the point of being dripping with blood and riddled with scars, and his lips frequently emitted cries of resentment, unwillingness, and misery. All the old freaks couldn't bear to continue watching such a miserable state, and they felt pained for the Nether Child. Why bother? If they knew this would happen, with all these old freaks present, how could they have allowed this battle to occur? But you, the Nether Child, just happened to be boundlessly arrogant and didn't listen at all. Now, it was no different from looking for a beating. Chapter 1660. Bang. In the end, Ming Child's body smashed fiercely into the hard ground of the battlefield of gods and demons. He let out a miserable cry, unable to get up again. His 16 pairs of wings were all broken, blood flowing out. His enormous body was riddled with holes, full of fist force, sword marks, and finger force. In the void, Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, full of ruthlessness. Swish. Without hesitation, he rushed down. But halfway there, he was stopped by a vast and formless energy. It was Shunji. He frowned and glared at Lin Sun, saying, I know you want to kill him, but if you do this in Imperial Pass, do you know what it will bring to yourself? Lin Sun was a bit unwilling at first, but when he heard this, he couldn't help but raise his eyebrows. Do I have to pay with my life? I won't go as far as paying with my life, but I can imprison you for 1,000 years. 1,000 years. Perhaps it won't take your life, but can you accept it? Shunji said quickly. He knew very well how precious time was for a young man like Lin Sun, who could be said to be an unprecedented talent. Because they still had great potential, still had the chance to fight for the peak. Not to mention 1,000 years, even 100 years might miss too many opportunities. In the so-called struggle for the great Tao, a single mistake might cause irreparable regret. I understand. Lin Sun took a deep breath, forcefully suppressing the killing intent in his heart. He naturally couldn't tolerate being imprisoned for 1,000 years. This was worse than killing him. That's it, he has already lost, and you have obtained a lot of benefits. When Shunji finished speaking, a strange expression appeared on his face. Even though this guy didn't kill Ming Child, he had obtained a lot of good treasures. For example, the Avicii sword, Great Dark Prison Seal, and the Holy Blood Talisman. Lin Sun looked at Ming Child. At this moment, he had already returned to his human form, his body dripping with blood, his face pale. He lay on the ground, extremely miserable. According to the bet, shouldn't you kneel and slap yourself? Lin Sun spoke. Ming Child's body trembled, and he shouted angrily, Kill me if you have the guts! You dare to bet, but you don't dare to admit it, haha. Lin Sun sneered and suddenly said, Why don't you take out the refining god pot and I will let you go this time? Dark Child was angered to the point of vomiting blood. This damned scoundrel! Not only did he steal so many of his treasures, he is also obsessed with his god refining pot. Shunji had a strange expression on his face, and he quickly transmitted his voice. Young friend, you can't take the smelting god pot. The karma of this treasure is too great, and it was left behind by the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor. As long as the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor doesn't die, even if you take this treasure, it's impossible for you to use it. The Netherworld Emperor's smelting god pot. In Imperial Pass City, who didn't know how inconceivable this treasure was. But until now, no one dared to covet this treasure. The first reason was because there was Gu Liangxiu, Imperial Pass No. 1 here. The second was because this god smelting pot was too troublesome. Once one was contaminated with karma, they wouldn't be able to shake it off for the rest of their lives. Really? Lin Sun was a little unwilling. The god smelting pot had saved the Dark Child many times, and it had also allowed the Dark Child to come back from the dead many times. Its power far exceeded one's imagination. If he could take it for himself, he might be able to save a few more lives. No. Shunji shook his head resolutely. What a joke. If the god smelting pot was lost, not to mention the karma, Gu Liangxiu would definitely rush over as soon as he heard the news, and the consequences would be severe. Lin Sun, I will remember this enmity. In the future, I will return it 100-fold. The Dark Child stood up from the ground, his face full of resentment. Bang! Lin Sun kicked him away, and it was unknown how many of his bones were broken. He fell fiercely more than 30 meters away, putting on a posture of a dog eating shit. The Dark Child was so angry that he almost fainted, and his teeth were about to break. Lin Sun's voice was cold. It's already merciful that I didn't make you kneel on the ground and slap yourself. You still dare to threaten me? Do you really think I don't dare to kill you? The Dark Child's body trembled violently, and he was ashamed, angry, and resentful to the extreme. In the end, without saying a word, he got up and rushed out of the Divine Devil Arena. This time, he had lost a lot of face. Not only was he defeated, but he also lost all his face. How could he have the face to stay? Lin Sun wanted to stop him. Even if he couldn't kill the Dark Child, he could at least plunder some treasures from this guy. After all, this fellow was just like a boy who delivered treasures to everyone. However, he was stopped by Shunji. Brat, stop. It's fine to offend the Dark Child, but at least you have to worry about the backer behind this guy. A long time ago, the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor also oversaw the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, serving the ancient Desolation region. His military exploits were matchless, and there are still many old monsters who remember his old friendships. For example, the number 1 of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, Gu Liangxiu, is just one of them. Lin Sun's black eyes flickered, and he finally gave up. Thinking about it, the Dark Child was indeed a guy with great fortune. His identity was the direct descendant of the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor, and his talent and foundation were also astonishing. He even had countless treasures on him. Even though the Dark Blood Underworld Emperor had left for so long, there were still many old monsters in the present world who remembered old friendships and became the Dark Child's backer. Shrouded by these halos, it was enough to make the eyes of those geniuses of the world turn red with jealousy. Unfortunately, this guy ran into him. He deserved to be unlucky. Mi Luo Palace. This was Madame Mu's residence. It was a palace built in front of a lake, simple and elegant. When the battle between Lin Sun and the Dark Child ended, everyone gathered here. Shunji took out the 10,000-year-old wine-surging snowstream, and Ling Xiaozi took out a jar of strong wine that originally belonged to martial emperors. The other old monsters took out all kinds of rare fruits, and some personally cooked delicious food. Everyone sat on the ground, tasting fine wine, eating delicacies, tasting fruits and vegetables, talking and laughing like a group of old friends gathering, the atmosphere harmonious and comfortable. Lin Sun, as a junior, became the target of the old monsters drinking. Not long after, he became intoxicated. These wines were all rare fine wines of the present world, treasures of quasi-emperors. Not only was the wine strong, but it also contained astonishing medicinal power. Even with Lin Sun's cultivation, after drinking so much wine, he still felt a sense of fullness, as if he had overnourished himself. Apart from this, the dishes, fruits, and vegetables at the banquet were all rare treasures, containing abundant essence power. For example, the drunken immortal chicken was made from a heavenly spirit bird called the 7 Feathers 3 Wonder Chicken, along with hundreds of divine ingredients, and was braised in a special cauldron. Just the cauldron alone was a divine treasure of extraordinary quality, and the fire used for the braising was the green rainbow Tao fire, one of the 9 fires of heaven and earth. It was no exaggeration to say that the drunken immortal chicken was comparable to a supreme medicine, and of course, its taste was absolutely wonderful. Another example was the red dawn fire jujube and the star Luan green peach, known as the Saint Yuan treasure embryo, the value of which was enough to make a saint king covet it. All of these became food in Lin Sun's stomach. With his current cultivation, how could he possibly digest them? Before long, he felt as if he was floating with the wind, and all kinds of terrifying power began to ferment in his body. Madame Mu had originally planned to have a private chat with Lin Sun after the banquet and introduce her granddaughter to him. But seeing this situation, she could only give up. In the end, when the banquet was over, Shunji took Lin Sun to the bronze palace owned by Mr. Shun. Before he left, Shunji suddenly said, "Young brother, in my opinion, Nether Child will definitely not let the matter rest after suffering such a crushing defeat. Don't go around randomly in the near future. You just have to stay here and lie low for a while. Once Mr. Shun returns, everything will be easily resolved." Hearing this, Lin Sun sobered up a little and said, "Thank you for your advice, Senior Qian." Shunji sneered and waved his hand, saying, "You should cultivate early and refine the energy in your body. This banquet can be considered as a token of goodwill from the old fellows. They have brought out many good things, don't waste them." After saying that, he turned around and left. Lin Sun smiled and felt warm in his heart. He was naturally aware that no matter if it was the delicacies or precious fruits of the banquet, they were extremely valuable. This is the demeanor of a real master, Lin Sun sighed. Without delay, he walked into the main hall and began to meditate with his legs crossed, refining the power that was about to run amok in his body. Time passed, and Lin Sun was soon immersed in deep cultivation. At the same time, the news about Lin Sun and Ling Xiaozi's victory in the Nine Palaces chess, and Lin Sun's suppression of the Child of Hell in the battlefield of deities and demons spread like wildfire in the huge Yang Pass. When did such a peerless genius appear in the ancient Desolation region? Even Ling Xiaozi was defeated? Unbelievable! Haha, the Child of Hell has finally received his retribution. Ever since he came to the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, relying on Gu Liangxiu as his backer, he has always been arrogant and doesn't put us in his eyes. Now that he has suffered a great defeat, won't he hide in shame? All the old monsters who heard the news were amazed and remembered Lin Sun's name. At the same time, most of the old monsters showed a gloating smile at the crushing defeat of the Child of Hell. In these years, the Child of Hell's arrogant and despotic attitude had offended many people. No one would like a junior to bare his fangs and brandish his claws at them. The Child of Hell is perverse and cruel. After suffering such a great humiliation, how could he swallow his anger? I just don't know what action he will take. Some people also realized that the situation was very likely to become serious. These things had nothing to do with Lin Sun for the time being. 2 days later, Lin Sun woke up from meditation, and his aura became more and more simple, ordinary. Just from the appearance, he didn't have any aura that a cultivator should have, and he was no different from an ordinary person. But the moment he opened his eyes, it was as if there were 2 bolts of lightning tearing the eternal night, tearing the void apart. His pupils were deep, reflecting the image of the great void abyss. An invisible power also spread in the empty and cold hall, making him look like a ruler. Although he was sitting cross-legged, there was a great power as if he was looking down on the mountains and rivers, overlooking the 9 heavens and 10 earths. Absolute true sage great circle. At this point, Lin Sun couldn't make any further progress in this realm, unless… Chapter 1662. Few Lin Sun's mind moved, and the horrible power that covered the whole palace disappeared into his body like a tide. At this moment, he was plain and ordinary, like his true self after all the splendor had faded away, unadorned and natural. This trip to Imperial Pass Great Wall has allowed me to gain quite a bit, Lin sighed with emotion in his heart. All along the way here, he'd witnessed all sorts of unbelievable scenes, and it was as if he'd pushed open a completely new door, causing his mind to be broadened while his experience and knowledge obtained a sublimation. This kind of experience nourished his cultivation base, causing his cultivation base to faintly approach the perfected late true sage stage. Moreover, the 3-inch sword qi, given to him by Elder Yin, allowed him to integrate it into his Taishen sword qi and successfully condense the true sword will. This was also not a small gain. All the way until he arrived at Imperial Pass Great Wall, the 9 Palaces chess match allowed him to obtain the experiences and insights of attacking at the Great Sage Realm from a group of old monsters. Defeating the Dark Child would allow him to obtain the Avicii Sword, the Great Dark Prison Seal, and the 10,000 Saints' Blood Spirit Talisman. At the banquet 2 days ago, a group of old monsters took out exotic fruits, immortal wine, and all kinds of delicious food, which provided the source of strength for Lin to reach the full closure this time. Thinking of this, how could Lin Sun not feel emotional? This was good fortune. If not for this trip to Imperial Pass Great Wall, there was no way his cultivation could have reached the consummate level in such a short amount of time. Similarly, it was impossible for him to obtain the insights and experience of those old monsters when they were trying to break through to the Great Saint Realm. Next, I need to prepare for the breakthrough to the Eminent Saint Realm. Taking a deep breath, Lin soon got rid of distractions and took out jade slips, which were the experiences of those old monsters when they tried to break through the great saint realm. As the saying goes, when three people walk together, there will always be a teacher. The experiences and comprehensions of the ancients were like mirrors. They could be used as a reference, and they could also help him avoid going astray. For Lin Sun, only with these experiences could he draw inferences about other cases from one instance and comprehend by analogy, so as to achieve the purpose of opening up his own way of cultivation. Only by relying on past experiences could one open up their own future. This was the meaning of carrying on the past and opening up the future. From a very early time, Lin Sun had been pursuing a path different from that of the ancients and the current world. He prayed for the phrase, "My Tao is the only one in all the heavens. I wonder when Mr. Shen will return." This was Lin Sun's last thought before he started to practice. Next, he was completely immersed in meditation. The experiences and insights of a group of old monsters in breaking through to the Great Sage Realm were like different paths leading to the Great Sage Realm. Every single one of them was different, and the dangers and opportunities they experienced during their advancement were also completely different. This was an eye-opener for Lin Sun. He often had a feeling of being enlightened. Occasionally, he would frown and ponder, and he discarded some experiences and comprehensions that weren't suitable for him. He chose their essence and discarded the dregs. In this kind of meditation, Lin Sun was unaware of the passage of time, and his understanding of breaking through to the Great Saint Realm was constantly improving. Vaguely, he was about to touch the path he longed for. "Old Shun, is there still no news from Songhai Pass?" That day, Madame Mu, Shunji, Ling Xiaozi and the others gathered together, discussing some matters regarding Imperial Pass Great Wall. Shunji shook his head and said, "No, it's been almost half a year. If there really is a big crisis, Mr. Shun, Gu Liangxiu, and the others will definitely light the Emperor's breath beacon fire, and let us know immediately." "I hope that everything is fine," Madame Mu muttered. Songhai Pass was an important stronghold of Imperial Pass Great Wall. Roughly half a year ago, the enemies of the 8 regions allied together, concentrating all of their forces in front of Songhai Pass, launching a great offensive. However, even now, there was no news that reached this Yang Pass, leaving the old monsters completely ignorant of this battle. They couldn't help but feel worried. "Don't worry, ever since Mr. Shun arrived at the front lines 3 years ago, he has displayed heaven and earth dominating talent, heaven and earth covering methods, slaughtering the enemies of the 8 regions until their heads bleed, sweeping away Imperial Pass Great Wall's depressing scene," Ling Xiaozi said with a sigh. "Right now, in Imperial Pass Great Wall, who doesn't know that as long as Mr. Shun is there, the greater situation can be settled? The front lines can also be worry-free?" Everyone couldn't help but nod, deeply agreeing with this. Mr. Shen came from the Divine Secret Pavilion. Regardless of whether it was intelligence, strategy, methods, or fighting strength, he could be considered a peak authority in the half-emperor realm, powerful to an inconceivable degree. There were rumors that Mr. Shen already had 1 foot in the threshold of emperor realm, could be called a half-step great emperor. I heard that ever since Mr. Shun arrived at Imperial Pass Great Wall, some of the decisions and strategies he made would often come into conflict with Gu Liangxiu. The two had previously argued many times because of this. Even now, they are still like fire and water. Suddenly, a half-emperor expert released a sigh. I also heard that Gu Liangxiu was originally the supreme figure in Imperial Pass Great Wall, regarded as Imperial Pass No. 1. Regardless of whether it was fighting strength or prestige, no one could compare to him. An old monster spoke up. However, following Mr. Shen's arrival, during these 3 years, Mr. Shen's prestige already vaguely seemed to be above Gu Liangxiu's. With Gu Liangxiu's pride, how could he tolerate being surpassed by Mr. Shen? Ling Xiaozi thought for a moment and said, Everyone knows that Gu Liangxiu's combat strength is undoubtedly formidable, and his ability to kill decisively is extremely extraordinary. But his flaw is very obvious as well, and it's that he acts too arbitrarily. The greater Mr. Shen's prestige is, the more Gu Liangxiu will oppose him. This is just like how a mountain cannot contain two tigers. Sigh, I can only hope that the two of them do not completely shed all pretense of cordiality. Otherwise, for the entire front lines, it will definitely not be a good thing. Quite a few people sighed. Right, old Shun, has little friend Lin Sun been cultivating these days? Suddenly, Madame Mu asked. Quite a few old monsters revealed strange expressions. They all understood that what Madame Mu had been thinking about the most these days was to matchmake Lin Sun, to introduce her granddaughter to him. Correct. Shun Ji nodded. Back then, I already warned him to lie low for a period of time to avoid that underworld child coming to find trouble with him. Now that I think about it, it's already been almost a month. I wonder if that brat is bored to death staying there alone. Madame Mu lightly bit her plump and moist red lips, sighing faintly. Everyone couldn't help but laugh. It was Madame Mu who was bored to death. Shunji couldn't help but say, "Children have their own blessings. I advise you not to get involved. The fate of this world is not something you can force. You've been a bachelor for thousands of years. What the hell do you know about fate? I've long since seen through you. With your virtue, no matter how high your cultivation is, no woman will take a liking to you." Madame Mu rolled her eyes and sneered. Shun Ji's face reddened as if he was angry from embarrassment. He shouted, "So what if I'm a bachelor? What qualifications do you have to look down on me? Don't you know that on the path of cultivation, only a bachelor can wholeheartedly pursue the Tao, severing the threads of affection and not be confused by it? Arguing with a woman was bound to be a mistake from the very beginning." Madame Mu laughed at this, radiating with beauty and peerless charm. Her fighting strength was also incomparably astonishing. She unhurriedly said, "Old bachelor, you're wrong. Have you forgotten the heartless demon emperor? How ruthless he was, but in his heart he had a wife whom he couldn't forget even in death. Is the heartless demon emperor inferior to you in the path of cultivation?" She paused for a moment and then said word by word, "In my opinion, the reason you haven't grasped the opportunity to break through to the emperor realm for thousands of years is because you don't have anyone to love you. You don't know what love is, and you don't know what family happiness is." Shun Ji's face turned red, as if he had been struck by a violent blow. Everyone couldn't help laughing. Not giving Shun Ji a chance to fight back, Madame Mu stood up and said with a smile, "I'll go see my little friend Lin Sun. You guys talk." However, as soon as her voice fell, she suddenly raised her eyebrows and looked at the entrance of Yangguan. Almost at the same time, the group of old monsters also seemed to be aware of it and stood up. Boom! In the distance, the void rumbled as a bronze chariot exuding vicissitudes of life crushed the void and galloped over as if it had teleported. In front of the chariot, there were 4 black dragon lions with bodies as huge as mountains, hooves like iron pillars, manes fluttering with divine splendor. Each black dragon lion alone had a terrifying aura comparable to that of a saint king, but now they could only play the role of pulling the chariot. Azure Dipper Chariot, this is Gu Liangxiu's chariot. Shun Ji's eyes narrowed. The other old monsters also felt their hearts tighten in an instant, realizing that something was wrong. And when they saw the 2 figures riding on the Azure Dipper Chariot, the group of old monsters completely understood and knew the problem. Because one of the figures was the child of hell. His expression was cold, and his long blood-red hair fluttered in the wind. A month ago, he was defeated and retreated, but now, he made a comeback. There was no need to ask, he was here for revenge. At the side of the dark child was a thin, mighty, and emaciated old man who wore a tall crown and a dark robe with wide sleeves, and had a cold and grim appearance. He stood with his hands clasped behind his back, and when his eyes opened and closed, The images of the sun rising and the moon setting and the divine rainbow piercing through the sky were reflected, incomparably terrifying. Old Taoist Chiu, it's him. Ling Xiao was slightly surprised. Shun Ji and the others secretly heaved a sigh of relief. Fortunately, it wasn't Gu Liangziu who came personally, otherwise the situation would be serious. But even so, no one dared to be careless. Old Taoist Chiu was a powerhouse who had stepped into the realm of Quasi-Emperor 8,000 years ago. He had a cold temperament, cruel methods, and killed countless enemies. In the entire Great Wall of Imperial Pass, Old Taoist Chiu's combat strength could be ranked in the top 10. Now, the Child of Hell actually invited Old Taoist Chiu to come to Yang Pass, so it went without saying that he definitely came to take revenge on Lin Sun. Rumble! The Azure Dipper chariot rumbled, and stopped in front of Shun Ji and the others. On the chariot, Old Taoist Chiu's gaze was indifferent as he glanced at everyone and said, "I presume everyone has already guessed the purpose of this poor Taoist's arrival. Here, this poor Taoist has something to say. No matter who it is, whoever dares to obstruct this poor Taoist's action today is this poor Taoist's enemy." His voice was cold, fierce, and peerlessly powerful. It surged through the heavens and the earth, causing the expressions of Shun Ji and the others to change slightly. As expected, he came with ill intentions. Chapter 1663. On the Azure Dipper war chariot, Old Taoist Chiu's attitude was unyielding. After a moment of silence, Ling Xiaozi said, "It is just a dispute between the younger generation. If Old Taoist Chiu interferes, then it is a bit too much." Old Taoist Chiu said coldly, "I am not here to speak reason. If you all want to stop me, then don't blame this poor Taoist for being impolite." To put it simply, he didn't plan to speak reason at all when he came this time. Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji and the others' faces all fell. Meanwhile, Underworld Child who stood on the Azure Dipper war chariot laughed, laughing incomparably complacently. So what if he was a fox borrowing the tiger's might? As long as he could get revenge, who cared about these things? If you all have the ability, then why don't you try to borrow the tiger's might for me to see? Out of the way! Old Taoist Chiu's voice was ice-cold. It was just these two words, but they were already oppressive. They were all quasi-emperors, but there were still differences in strength. For example, Gu Liangziu was known as Imperial Pass No. 1. Meanwhile, Old Taoist Chiu's strength could rank in the top 10 of Imperial Pass, so his power was naturally not small. The expressions of the old monsters changed again. Old Taoist Chiu's attitude was more than unyielding. He didn't even place them in his eyes. Unreasonable, using power to bully others, right? Fine, if you want to take action, then this old one will play with you. Shun Ji was furious. Boom. As soon as his voice fell, Old Taoist Chiu waved his sleeves. Heaven and earth shook, all things changing colors. An incomparable blade radiance swept out, hacking down from the sky. From start to finish, he didn't waste any words. "If you want to fight, then I'll help you." Amidst the deafening rumbling, Shun Ji's figure suddenly shook, and he staggered a few steps back. Every single step he took caused space to suddenly collapse. When he stabilized his figure, his expression already became pale. The power of a single blade was actually terrifying to this degree. The expressions of the old monsters all changed, realizing that this old Taoist Chiu was clearly determined to deal with Lin Sun, not even giving Shun Ji face. Again, Shun Ji's expression was ashen, about to rush up, but he was stopped by Ling Xiaozi, saying, "You are not his opponent, let me do it." Ling Xiaozi stepped out, his expression like an ancient well without ripples. He looked straight at old Taoist Chiu, saying expressionlessly, "Imperial Pass main city restricts internal strife, but if you, old Taoist Chiu, really don't care about anything, then I, Ling Xiaozi, will play with you." Old Taoist Chiu narrowed his eyes slightly and said, "Ling Xiaozi, you should know that I'm not here to be your enemy. As long as you hand over Lin Sun, I'll leave immediately." Ling Xiaozi was Imperial Pass Great Wall's #1 Dao Pattern Grandmaster. During these years, he established endless contributions. Perhaps his fighting strength could only be considered ordinary, but he was an important character that couldn't be lost. Even Gu Liangchu had to be courteous to him. In your dreams. Ling Zhao's attitude was unyielding, not backing down in the slightest. Old man, are you trying to become enemies with us? Dark Child couldn't bear to watch any longer, and he shouted loudly. This caused Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and the others' expressions to become unsightly. Did a junior think that just because he had old Daoist Chiu as a backer, he could speak rudely and go against his superiors? Old Daoist Chiu also couldn't help but frown, berating Dark Child. Ling Xiaozi is Imperial Pass Great Wall Senior. His contributions great, you cannot be disrespectful. After saying this, he looked towards Ling Xiaozi and said, This time, I came under Sir Gu Liangchu's orders. If you, Ling Xiaozi, stand in my way, then it is the same as not giving Sir Gu Liangchu face. He produced a black jade tile. If you don't believe me, you can take a look at this tile. Wang the tile shone. A tall figure appeared, dressed in hemp clothes, long hair scattering down, appearance simple and unyielding, eyes deep like a boundless sea. Ling Xiaozi and the others' eyes narrowed. This hemp-clothed man was precisely Imperial Pass Great Wall's #1, Gu Liangchu. Walla as old Daoist Chiu put away the tile, Gu Liangchu's void figure also disappeared. Only Ling Xiaozi and the others' expressions were already extremely overcast. For the sake of dealing with a younger generation, not only did old Daoist Chiu move out, even Gu Liangchu stood out. This was clearly bullying. The atmosphere was stifling. No one expected Gu Liangchu, the glorious Imperial Pass Great Wall's #1, to actually bring out his own tile for this type of small matter. Ho ho! Mingzi sneered. All of this was within his expectation. He knew that with these old monsters here, even if old Daoist Chiu came out, it would be difficult to deal with Lin Sun. Therefore, he didn't hesitate to go through so much trouble to obtain a tile from Gu Liangchu in order to frighten these old things, so that they wouldn't dare to protect Lin Sun again. Where is Lin Sun? Get out here! At this moment, old Daoist Chiu suddenly let out a loud shout. His voice was like the ninth heaven's thunder, surging in all directions, echoing endlessly in the huge sunshine. For a moment, the huge Yangguan was alarmed, and many old monsters stationed there were also alarmed. Ling Xiaozi said angrily, Old Daoist Chiu, you have gone too far. Even if Gu Liangchu came in person, he wouldn't dare to be as presumptuous as you. The others were also furious, their faces as gloomy as water. But old Daoist Chiu said indifferently, Everyone, I am just following orders. If I have offended you in any way, I will make it up to you in the future. Lin Sun, are you a coward? Get out here quickly. At the same time, Mingzi also roared, fearless, as if there was no one else around, not caring about the anger of Ling Xiaozi and the others at all. For a moment, more and more strong auras in Yangguan paid attention to this side. Old Daoist Chiu. Ling Xiaozi was completely furious. His beard and hair flew in the air as he pointed at old Daoist Chiu and said, Today, with me here, I'd like to see who dares to harm little friend Lin Sun. Shun Ji and Madame Mu also nodded. They all understood the grievances between Mingzi and Lin Sun. It was completely a dispute between the younger generation. But old Daoist Chiu came here regardless of face, wanting to deal with Lin Sun under their noses. How could they tolerate it? Old Daoist Chiu couldn't help but frown. He never thought that these old guys would be so insistent. As far as he knew, Lin Sun was only a junior who had just arrived at the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, not a direct descendant of some great force, and had no relationship with Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji and the others. Originally, dealing with a junior like this was a trivial matter, but who would have thought that he would encounter so many obstructions? After a moment of silence, old Daoist Chiu said, Everyone, don't worry. This time, this humble Taoist won't deal a fatal blow. As long as Lin Sun hands over the treasure he seized from Mingzi's hands and apologizes to Mingzi, this humble Taoist can let bygones be bygones. This was already his concession. However, Mingzi immediately became unhappy, saying, "I want Lin Sun dead. If he doesn't die, where will I put my face?" "Don't worry, there will be plenty of opportunities in the future." This humble Taoist didn't expect these old things to be so partial to a junior. If we shed all pretense of cordiality with them, today's matter will definitely be blown out of proportion. The consequences won't be good for anyone. Old Taoist Xiu quickly transmitted his voice. Mingzi's expression changed continuously. Only after a while did he grit his teeth and say, "Fine, I agree. However, I will definitely make Lin Sun kneel and apologize." Old Taoist Xiu immediately agreed. It was just making a junior kneel. With just a thought, he could suppress him to the ground. It was too simple. Meanwhile, when they heard old Taoist Xiu's proposal, Ling Xiaozi and the others became more and more annoyed. Handing over the spoils was one thing, but they even wanted Lin Sun to apologize? How could there be such a ridiculous thing in the world? Swish! Just at this moment, our escaping light suddenly emerged in the distance and broke through the air. Looking carefully, it was the figure of Lin Sun. Just now, he was meditating in the palace, but he was awakened by old Taoist Xiu's voice. Immediately, he heard Mingzi's complacent and resentful shout, which made him realize in an instant. The revenge of the boy who delivers treasures had come. This was Yangguan, which was guarded by a group of old monsters, but Mingzi dared to shout so fearlessly. It could be sure that he must have something to rely on. Almost without any thinking, Lin Sun decided to take the initiative to attack. It was very simple. He wouldn't let Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji, and the others be implicated because of this matter. After all, this was a grudge between him and Mingzi. As expected, before long Lin Sun saw the Cyan Dipper chariot in the distance, as well as old Taoist Xiu and Mingzi standing proudly on the chariot. "Lin Sun, you finally dare to show up." The moment he saw Lin Sun, old and new hatred welled up in Mingzi's heart. His face became ferocious, and he shouted, "This time, no one in the world can save you. Young friend, how can you be so muddle-headed?" Seeing Lin Sun take the initiative to appear, Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji, and Madame Mu immediately became anxious. If Lin Sun hid, these old monsters could still deal with this matter, but now there was no room for maneuver. "Seniors, this matter arose because of me, so it should be settled by me," Lin Sun said with a calm smile. Lin Sun smiled calmly. "In addition, I'm very grateful for your kindness, but this time, I'd like to ask you to just stand by and watch." Everyone was stunned. Madame Mu was anxious and displeased. She said angrily, "Young friend, what do you think we are? If we let you be bullied in Yangguan, wouldn't it be a slap to our faces?" The others also nodded. Suddenly, old Taoist Xiu roared with laughter and said, "Everyone, don't think too highly of yourselves. Since this kid dared to stand out, then he can be considered to have taken responsibility. I naturally won't make things too difficult for him. As I said before, hand over the treasures and apologize to the dark child, and I can let bygones be bygones." Speaking of this, he locked his eyes on Lin Sun and said, "Young man, what do you say?" "Ha ha." Lin Sun revealed a cynical smile. "In my opinion, you two, the young one is nothing, and the old one is even less. If you want to leave here alive, you'd better restrain yourself, lest you cry for mercy when you are suppressed later." Shunji, Ling Xiao, and Madame Mu were all dumbfounded. Had this brat been forced into a corner and decided to throw caution to the wind? Mingzi was so angry that his face turned black and blue veins stood out on his forehead. He said to old Taoist Xiu, "Senior, as you can see, this little bastard doesn't repent even when death is at hand. If we don't kill him now, when will we? Indeed, he is rampant." Old Taoist Xiu's face was cold. Lin Sun's insubordination and almost cursing made him furious. For so many years, even ordinary quasi-emperors were respectful to him and dared not slight him. But now, a mere junior dared to openly challenge his dignity. He was clearly courting death. Boom! A terrifying aura emanated from old Taoist Chiu's body. When a saint was angry, blood would flow like a river. Let alone a quasi-emperor? Chapter 1664. Once a quasi-emperor got angry, a wisp of his aura could collapse the sky and destroy the mountains and rivers. How dare you! At this moment, Shunji, Madame Mu and others did not hesitate to activate their own power, releasing the power around them. Rumble! A group of quasi-emperors confronted each other with swords drawn. That scene was so horrible that the void nearby suddenly exploded into pieces. In Yangguan, there were many exclamations at this time. The old monsters who were secretly watching all this did not expect that the situation would become so tense at this moment. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold. At that moment, he felt a strong killing intent. There was no doubt that old Chiu wanted to kill him. Seniors, let me fight alone. Lin Sun suddenly stepped forward with a calm manner, and his eyes became more and more deep and cold. Shunji and others were speechless. Didn't this boy understand the situation? How could he be old Chiu's opponent alone? Ha ha, don't you see that this boy is obviously going to atone for his crime with death, but you just want to stand in his way? Don't you think too much of yourself? On the cyan dipper chariot, old Chiu looked up to the sky and laughed. Ling Xiaozi and others looked gloomy, but they still stood there firmly. This was Yangguan, where they were stationed. If they couldn't even protect Lin Sun, how could they face others? Seeing this, Lin Sun was moved and helpless. He couldn't help saying, "Seniors, I really don't want you to get involved in this matter. I will bear all the consequences alone." Shunji said angrily, "Little guy, I have never seen anyone like you to undermine me. Everyone is doing this for your own good." Old Chiu laughed again. "Look, you really think too much of yourself." Suddenly, a roar rang out. In front of the cyan dipper chariot, a black dragon lion suddenly rushed out like a black cloud, moving the void and pouncing on Lin Sun. His speed was fast, and his aura was ferocious. It was terrifying beyond imagination. Not good. The expressions of Shunji and others changed slightly. This black dragon lion was a natural variant. It had been subdued by Gu Liangxiu a long time ago and kept by his side for cultivation. Even though these ferocious creatures were only pulling carts, every single one of them possessed battle prowess comparable to Saint King's. They were extremely ferocious. Not to mention a true sage like Lin Sun, even a great sage would not be a match for the ink dragon lion beast. "Evil creature, how dare you!" Madame Mu cursed and was about to act. The situation was dangerous. Previously, their aura and target had been locked onto old Taoist Chiu. No one had expected that the ink dragon sure would suddenly attack. But before Lady Mu could do anything, an inconceivable scene unfolded. The ink dragon lion that pounced on Lin soon fell to the ground with a thud in the air. It crawled on the ground, shivered, and whimpered in horror as if it was scared out of its wits. How was this a ferocious creature comparable to a Saint King? It was simply too unbearable. The atmosphere suddenly became strangely silent. Shunji, Madame Mu, Ling Xiaozi, and the others were all stunned. What was going on? On the azure dipper chariot, the smile on old Taoist Chiu's face froze, and his pupils constricted as if he had seen a ghost. This, Ming Child's eyes almost popped out. "You're a ink dragon sure comparable to a Saint King. Why the hell are you acting like a sick cat?" Then, everyone saw that a snow-white leaf had appeared in Lin Sun's palm. The leaf was round and translucent, flowing with a strange luster. A bronze ant the size of a sesame seed was lying on it. The bronze ant was so small and inconspicuous, but when the old monsters looked at it, their hearts trembled. What a terrifying aura! What kind of existence was this? For a moment, the atmosphere became even more silent. Everyone understood why the ink dragon Shur, who was comparable to a saint king, would be so frightened. It was all because the aura of the bronze ant was too terrifying. At this moment, Lin Sun said to the bronze ant as if he was lecturing his grandson, "Let's make it clear. I'll let you come out and get some fresh air. If you dare to be naughty, I'll seal you up forever." The bronze ant seemed to be furious, shaking its antennae. But in the end, it compromised and squeezed out a word from its lips: "Yes." Everyone was dumbfounded. How could such a terrifying bronze ant completely obey a junior like Lin Sun? Lin Sun smiled with satisfaction. With a flick of his fingertips, the snow-white leaf trembled. Boom! The bronze ant flew out. Its sesame seed body instantly grew to the size of a calf. Its whole body seemed to be made of divine gold, emitting a brilliant aura. In particular, its pair of sharp forelimbs were as frightening as the sharp blades of divine weapons. As the bronze ant revealed its true appearance, a cold and ruthless aura spread out, covering the heavens and earth, causing the heavens and earth to tremble. It seemed to be starving. As soon as it appeared, it opened its mouth and sucked in the ink dragon Shur, who was crawling on the ground and chewed hard. The sound of bones and flesh exploding came from those sharp teeth. Fresh blood flowed, causing the nearby old monsters to feel their hair stand on end. Vigorous bronze ant. This was actually a rare primordial variant that possessed inconceivable power. Damn it, Ming Child was stunned. His mind was in a daze, and he couldn't say a word. Old Daoist Chio's face darkened, and he shouted angrily, "You're courting death!" With a wave of his sleeve, a peerless blade aura descended from the sky like a waterfall falling from the 9 heavens, creating a vast expanse of whiteness. With a swoosh, the bronze ant disappeared into thin air. In the next moment, another ink dragon lion was bitten by the bronze ant, and it started chewing in large mouthfuls. The remaining 2 ink dragon lions were so frightened that they crawled on the ground, not daring to struggle at all. They were completely intimidated by the bronze ant. This made old Daoist Chio flustered and exasperated, and he attacked without hesitation. A quasi-emperor expert who could be ranked in the top 10 of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass was naturally not to be underestimated. As old Daoist Chio attacked, the space around him became chaotic, and it fell into a state of collapse and destruction. However, when these attacks landed on the bronze ant, they only produced clanging sounds and dazzling sparks. They couldn't break through the bronze ant's shell at all. During this process, the bronze ant ate the remaining 2 ink dragon lions one after another. Its mouth was full of blood, and its ferocious appearance made all the old monsters shudder with fear. Even Lin Sun couldn't help but gasp. Wasn't a quasi-emperor creature like the bronze ant that hibernated in the mulberry forest a little too ferocious? Was old Daoist Chio too weak? No. It was because the bronze ant was too powerful. Evil creature! At this moment, old Daoist Chio was so angry that his eyes were about to split, and even his eyes were red. This Azure Dipper war chariot belonged to Gu Liangxiu, and those 4 ink dragon lions were also raised by Gu Liangxiu. Now they were all eaten. How was he going to explain this to Gu Liangxiu when he returned? As for Dark Child, his scalp had already gone numb from the bloody scenes that happened before him, and he almost pissed his pants. How could a bronze ant be so powerful? Old thing, I ignored you, and now you're getting angry? I haven't had my fill yet, so I'll use you to fill my stomach. The bronze ant that hadn't retaliated all this time looked at old Daoist Chio with a pair of malevolent eyes, and its ruthless aura rushed into the sky. Boom! Its figure was swift and violent, and its sharp forelimbs cut through the void. Like a ferocious god of the ages, it charged toward old Daoist Chio. Shun Ji and the others were shocked by its unparalleled power. They finally realized that they had guessed wrong just now. Lin Sun didn't see through the situation, and he wasn't trying to be a hero. He was clearly fearless. With such a ferocious creature to rely on, there was no need for these old fellows to take action. Rumble! A battle between quasi-emperors broke out. Old Taoist Chiu and the Bronze Ant had already fought their way to the ninth heaven. Every time they clashed, it was like a battle between gods, setting off a storm in all directions. Even with Lin Sun's current strength, he couldn't see the specific situation of the battle at all. After all, it was a battle between quasi-emperors, and the means and power used were not something he could understand at all. But he could still see that the Bronze Ant obviously had the upper hand. It attacked repeatedly, swiftly, ferociously, and domineeringly. On the contrary, old Taoist Chiu was in a disadvantageous position, and from time to time, he let out angry roars. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, Ling Xiaozi, and the other quasi-emperors were all watching the battle nervously. This was not a battle between the younger generation, but a fierce battle between peers. They were all dazzled and shocked. Old Taoist Chiu was a famous quasi-emperor in Imperial Pass, and his combat strength was obvious to all. Otherwise, Shun Ji wouldn't have been forced back by old Taoist Chiu with a single strike. But now, a Bronze Ant rushed out, and displayed a terrifying combat strength that was enough to firmly suppress old Taoist Chiu. This naturally made people tremble. Where did it come from? With its monstrous ferocious power, how could it obey Lin Sun? This was too inconceivable. At this moment Lin Sun looked at Ming Child and smiled slightly. It seems that it was you who called me to appear just now, treasure boy. Madame Mu couldn't help but giggle. This kid was too direct. What do you want to do? On the Azure Dipper chariot, Ming Child's body stiffened. A treasure trove is right in front of you. Tell me, if it was you, what would you do? Lin Sun walked over, smiling. He looked at Ming Child as if he was staring at a treasure trove, blazing and bright. Ming Child was so angry that his face turned green. He was shocked, angry, annoyed, and afraid. Right now, the 4 ink dragon lions had been eaten, and old Taoist Chiu was fighting with the Bronze Ant. He had no time to pay attention to anything else. How could Ming Child not be afraid? No matter how angry and annoyed he was, he didn't have the courage to fight Lin Sun again. The crushing defeat last time was still vivid in his mind. How could he look for trouble again? Run. Without hesitation, Ming Child turned and fled. That was straightforward and efficient. However, Lin Sun's figure had already flashed, appearing in front of him. His face was still smiling as he said, "This time, I can't let you leave." As he spoke, he attacked without hesitation, and didn't hold anything back. Boom! When he punched out, it was as if a furnace of the great Tao had appeared in the sky. It possessed an everlasting might that could suppress everything. Many people had cleverly guessed that the ice and snow leaf left behind by the golden cicada great emperor was one of Lin Sun's trump cards. But why was the Bronze Ant so powerful? Chapter 1667. If you don't kill a snake, you'll be harmed instead. This was vividly reflected by Ming Zi. Last time, due to the rules of Imperial Pass, Lin Sun spared his life. Only a month later, he made a comeback, and he even brought old Taoist Chiu, a quasi-emperor realm old monster. If it wasn't for Lin Sun having many trump cards in his possession, the outcome today would be difficult to say. So this time, he didn't intend to let Ming Zi live at all. Ming Zi was greatly shocked, and he didn't hesitate to withdraw a brilliant green pearl. It shone brilliantly in the air, and then countless vines surged out madly from the pearl like countless intertwining pythons. Bang! But in merely the blink of an eye, those countless vines were crushed by the terrifying fist force, and the broken vines transformed into a roiling rain of light that scattered down. But strangely, this rain of light didn't dissipate, and it instead transformed into a green ocean that covered the heavens and the earth as it enveloped Lin Sun once more. Moreover, its might didn't decrease but increased instead, and it gave others a feeling that it was vast, boundless, and endless. This was the green ocean bead. Rumor had it that this treasure naturally contained the natural sources of green wood and black water. Not only could it be used for cultivation, it was also equipped with extremely miraculous means of attack. All right. Lin Sun's black eyes lit up as he suddenly stretched out his hand and tore it apart. Swish! The green ocean that covered the heavens and the earth was torn apart like a piece of cloth. Lin Sun immediately stretched out his hand and grabbed towards Ming Zi's head. It was like a dragon's claw had stretched out from the clouds and enveloped the surroundings. Ming Zi's expression changed greatly, and he was shocked to the point his soul almost left his body. He didn't have the time to withdraw the green ocean bead at all, and blazing bloody light surged out explosively from his body as he instantly vanished on the spot. Escape method: everlasting blood concealment. Lin Sun's attack missed, but he took advantage of the opportunity to put away the green ocean bead. With a slight perception, he noticed the profundities of this treasure, and he couldn't help but praise in his heart. Ming Zi's eyesight really isn't bad, and none of the treasures he carries are ordinary. As he thought like this in his heart, his movements weren't slow at all. He swept out with his divine sense and suddenly punched towards the distant space. Bang! The space exploded like glass, and Ming Zi's figure staggered out from within. He seemed to not dare believe that he was discovered so easily by Lin Sun. At this moment, Lin Sun had already charged over, not giving the Dark Child a chance to catch his breath. "This is too much!" Dark Child roared furiously, his face warped and savage as he suddenly waved his hand, and a pair of flying daggers shot out explosively. This pair of flying daggers, one black and one white, were both slender and small, only 7 inches long and 2 fingers wide. The black flying dagger was engraved with the ancient word Grand In. The white flying dagger was engraved with Extreme Yang. As soon as they shot out explosively, the 2 flying sabers emitted clanging sounds while their killing intent shot into the sky, and they possessed the peerless spirit of slaughtering gods and dividing the pure and muddy. Yin and Yang flying blade. Lady Mu, who had been paying close attention to this match, was shocked. Lin Sun also felt a tingling sensation on his skin. He couldn't help but be moved. This pair of flying daggers was definitely a rare treasure. Whoosh! Whoosh! With no time to think, Lin Sun dodged the attack. A dark blade almost brushed his cheek and cut off a strand of his hair. On the other side, the dark white blade flashed and tore the clothes at Lin Sun's shoulder. A string of bright red blood blossomed, and a wound was torn open on his shoulder. This pair of flying daggers was so fast and sharp that Lin Sun exclaimed in admiration. What a good treasure! Though he had succeeded in one strike, Dark Child was not happy. He did not hesitate to put away this pair of treasures. He knew Lin Sun's character too well. This guy had always regarded himself as a treasure boy and was extremely despicable and shameless. How could he miss such a treasure in front of him? However, Lin Sun had already rushed out one step ahead. With a burst of loud laughter, he suddenly took out the Endless Way Tower. "I'll take this pair of treasures." Boom! The dark golden light swept out all over the sky, enveloping everything. Dark Child roared angrily and tried his best to take back the treasures, but it was all in vain. The pair of flying daggers was wrapped up by the dark golden light and directly cut off from him. Then, they flew into Lin Sun's palm. When he saw this scene, Dark Child was so angry he coughed out blood. He saw stars before his eyes. The feeling of incomparable humiliation stimulated him to the point where he wanted to fight Lin Sun to the death. Something like this had happened more than once in the Absolute Summit domain. Not long ago, it happened again, and now it was still happening. The humiliation and hatred he suffered time and time again battered Dark Child's mental state like a landslide and a tsunami, almost making him go crazy. Lin Sun didn't care about this and charged over again. This guy Dark Child's background was too rich. Every time, he could bring out a treasure that made his eyes light up. It was simply a pleasant surprise. In an instant, dark child's anger seemed to have been extinguished. He sensed extreme danger, as if the shadow of death was imminent. Ling Xiaozi, are you all just going to watch this little bastard commit murder in Imperial Pass Chong City? In the sky, old Taoist Chiu, who was beaten into a sorry state, released a furious roar. Boom! As soon as old Taoist Chiu's voice sounded, Lin Sun only felt a chill in his heart. His charging figure immediately stopped. With a flip of his palm, that snow-like leaf appeared again. Vaguely, a dark green flood dragon could be seen within. At the same time, the expressions of Shun Ji, Madame Mu and the others couldn't help but change. They immediately saw that old Taoist Chiu broke free from the battle, moved through the void, and charged towards Lin Sun. That speed was so fast that Shun Ji and the others couldn't help but have no time to help. In reality, no one expected that old Taoist Chiu, who was in a disadvantageous position, could actually break free at this moment and directly target Lin Sun. Even if he could kill Lin Sun this time, he would inevitably expose a fatal flaw. The bronze ant would take advantage of this opportunity to kill him, and even if he didn't die, he would be seriously injured. This was undoubtedly a desperate method that would cause both sides to suffer. What was most unexpected was that the bronze ant didn't take action, and didn't even try to stop it. It seemed extremely abnormal. Could it be that this vicious creature was also eager to borrow old Taoist Chiu's hand to get rid of Lin Sun? This thought emerged in the minds of Shun Ji, Ling Xiaozi and the others, making their hearts suddenly tighten. Seeing that Lin Sun was already in an extremely urgent situation, a vast green dragon shadow suddenly rushed out from Lin Sun's palm, fiercely swinging its tail. Bang! Old Taoist Chiu came fast, and left even faster. His body was directly whipped out, flying upside down in the void like a ball. In the process, blood sprayed from his mouth and nose, and his body trembled violently because of the pain. But before he could react, the bronze ant, who was already under the sky, had already brazenly rushed to him and took the opportunity to launch a fatal attack. Shun Ji, Madame Mu and the others were dumbfounded. This series of changes happened almost in the blink of an eye, but the danger of the process was enough to make anyone tremble. In front of Lin Sun, there was a huge green flood dragon with a length of 300 meters. Its body was winding like a mountain ridge. Its pair of cold eyes released a terrible power that made people's hearts palpitate. This was another creature whose power was not weaker than that of the bronze ant. Its strong breath made Shun Ji and the others breathless. Originally, the appearance of a bronze ant shocked all the old monsters and made them feel incredible. But now there was another green flood dragon with unfathomable strength. This made those old monsters unable to help but be in a trance, their minds shaken. How many years had it been? Even in the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, such an incredible thing rarely happened. And Ming Child was already completely dumbfounded. It was true that he had many treasures on him, but how could Lin Sun have so many inconceivable and terrifying things to help him? But at this moment, Lin Sun simply could not be bothered to pay attention to this. His eyes were cold as he stared at the bronze ant in the sky. Little ant, it seems that you were very disobedient just now. Do you feel ashamed to be controlled by a little true saint like me? Little ant. To a quasi-emperor with terrifying combat strength, this title undoubtedly carried a taste of humiliation. But the bronze ant could not care about this. It seemed to be a little flustered, saying, "I definitely did not have such intentions. I was just careless before, it will definitely not happen again." Haha, dishonest. With your combat strength, killing that old thing is just a matter of a moment, so why did you delay until now? Isn't it because you wanted to find an opportunity to borrow a knife to kill this kid, so that you can escape from the restrictions set up by the golden cicada in one fell swoop? The green flood dragon sneered. It did not seem to mind exposing the bronze ant's true intentions. Lin Sun's face became more and more gloomy. The bronze ant flew into a rage and roared, "Old worm, don't try to frame me. I can swear to the heavens that I have never had such disloyalty. Ridiculous, at our level, what oath is there to talk about? In this world, what oath can bind you and me? The green flood dragon sneered. Shun-Ji and the others were bewildered, somewhat unable to understand. Whether it was the bronze ant or the green flood dragon, although they obeyed Lin Sun's orders, they seemed to have other intentions. They were obviously not good people. The bronze ant still wanted to say something, but Lin Sun had already shouted resolutely, "Enough! Since you are not being honest, then get back!" As he spoke, the ice and snow leaf in his palm suddenly suffused with a strange light, filled with a supreme and terrifying power, sweeping across the sky. No. The bronze ant was shocked, but before his voice died away, his body continued to shrink, and finally turned into a tiny ant like a sesame seed, and was resealed in the ice and snow leaf. At the same time, the green flood dragon, who had just appeared, was also anxious and roared, "My little friend, I just saved your life. Why do you do this to me?" But Lin Sun turned a deaf ear to it. Soon, the green flood dragon was also sealed. Golden cicada, wait and see. When I become an emperor, I will avenge you. The green flood dragon's unwilling and angry roar still resounded between heaven and earth. However, the atmosphere in the field had become extremely depressing. This sudden turn of events caused no one to be able to react in time. It was incredible that the two unimaginably horrible creatures could not resist Lin Sun at all. Who could believe it? Even old Taoist Chiu was in a trance for a while. Before, he was constantly injured and almost couldn't hold on. Unexpectedly, in a twinkling of an eye, the two great enemies disappeared. When he looked at Lin Sun again, there was unspeakable fear in his eyes. Where did this boy come from? How could he have such strange means? Immediately, his eyes fell on the ice and snow crystal leaf in Lin Sun's palm. Obviously, the reason of all this was in it. Add more to send, ask for monthly votes from my old friends. In addition, many children asked why the protagonist didn't directly use his big moves. The reason was very simple. The protagonist was also afraid of those quasi-emperors sealed in the ice and snow leaves. Chapter 1669. A single leaf could seal two horrible creatures in the quasi-emperor realm, leaving them at the mercy of it and without the strength to struggle. How terrible was this? A thought suddenly came to old Chiu's mind. A sovereign weapon. This ordinary-looking snowy leaf must be a monarch weapon. Otherwise, how could it possibly seal such a terrifying creature? And his eyes revealed a strong killing intent as he looked at Lin Sun. This time, he had completely offended Lin Sun. If he didn't take the opportunity to get rid of Lin Sun, he was bound to cause endless trouble in the future. Instead of this, it was better to take this opportunity to kill Lin Sun once and for all. Most importantly, he could also get the suspected emperor weapon, the ice leaf. At the same time, Ling Xiaozi, Shun-Ji, Madame Mu and others also noticed the extraordinariness of the ice leaf. Looking at old Chiu's expression, they all shouted in their hearts that it was not good. Now that the two horrible creatures had been sealed, even if they appeared again, how could they work for Lin Sun with their previous anger? Swish! Before anyone could react, old Chiu had moved through the void and appeared in front of Lin Sun like a ghost, pressing out his palm. The speed was so fast that it shocked the world. However, the next moment, he screamed as his right hand was directly cut off by a gorgeous sword chi. The sword chi even had a kind of shocking demonic feeling, and its sharpness was terrible. If old Chiu hadn't dodged in time and escaped far away, he would have been killed by this sword. There's more? Old Chiu's face changed dramatically, his hair disheveled and his face full of horror. Before, he had been injured by the bronze ants, and now his right hand was cut off. Although it healed in a flash, he was still suffering under the attack of the sword chi. What made him most frightened was that there was a demonic flower standing in front of Lin Sun. Its whole body was red like fire, its petals crystal clear and magnificent, and the light rain that drifted out turned into hundreds of millions of misty sword chi, mysterious and terrible. This, of course, was the thousand-feather sword flower, an ancient species raised by heaven and earth. It had become famous as early as the ancient times, and only needed an opportunity to enter the Emperor realm. Back in the mulberry forest, Zhao Yuanji had said that the thousand-feather sword flower was one of the most terrifying creatures in the mulberry forest that could not be provoked. As soon as this flower appeared, it displayed a world-shaking divine might that engulfed everyone. Shunji, Madame Mu, and the others were speechless. There really was more. Moreover, based on its aura, the might of this demonic flower was obviously even stronger than the vigorous bronze ant and the dark green flood dragon. Moreover, such a terrifying existence was actually sealed within a tiny snowy leaf, and this was undoubtedly too shocking. You've seen what the ant and the long worm did just now. Do you know what to do now? Lin Sun broke the silence. His gaze was extremely cold. If it was said that he didn't have the intention to kill old Taoist Chiu in the beginning, then now, he couldn't tolerate this old thing continuing to live. I'm not as stupid as them. The thousand-feather sword flower opened its mouth, and its voice was as loud as the cry of a sword. In an instant, its chi activity was like an avalanche, locking onto old Taoist Chiu in the distance. Dark child, let's go. Old Taoist Chiu's expression changed drastically. He turned around and fled without hesitation. He didn't have time to escape with Dark Child, so he could only warn him. Hong. As a half-emperor, he had long familiarized himself with the spatial laws. With old Taoist Chiu's strength, if he fled with all of his strength, there weren't many in Imperial Pass who could stop him. However, this time, something unexpected happened. A flower petal silently fluttered down in front of old Taoist Chiu, gentle and beautiful, giving off a bewitching and indistinct feeling. However, in that instant, old Taoist Chiu was so shocked his pupils dilated, even his soul almost leaving his body. His body that was shifting through the void suddenly went rigid. The flower petal quietly withered, but there were millions and millions of hazy sword energy that appeared, covering heaven and earth with heaven and earth power, drowning out heaven and earth. From the distance, it was as if a silver river of sword energy descended from the 9 heavens, covering the world. No! Within the sky full of sword energy, old Taoist Chiu's figure could no longer be seen. However, his miserable, alarmed, and unwilling roar still resounded through the sky dome. Shunji, Ling Xiaozi, and Madame Mu all broke out in cold sweat, their hands and feet going cold. This scene was too horrifying. Old Taoist Chiu was not an ordinary quasi-emperor. His battle prowess was enough to rank in the top 10 of Imperial Pass. However, right now, he was like a duckweed that drowned in a sea of sword energy. In the blink of an eye, he was suppressed and killed. Forget about struggling. He couldn't even block it. It couldn't be said to be a fox mourning the death of a rabbit, but right now, Shun-Ji and the others all felt intimidated, their minds trembling. That bewitching sword flower, how could it be so terrifying? Could it be a half-step emperor? But right now, Lin Sun didn't have time to be shocked. The instant old Taoist Chiu fled, he also locked his aura on Underworld Child, immediately launching a murderous attack. Who would have thought that Underworld Child would use some unknown method? His entire body would instantly become illusory, turning into strands of blood-colored mist and disappearing. How terrifying was Lin Sun's battle prowess, but he couldn't shatter those strands of gentle mist at all. He could only watch as Underworld Child disappeared before his eyes. Lin Sun, I will return. These were the words Underworld Child left behind before he left, carrying bone-deep hatred, anger, and coldness. Lin Sun's expression flickered. Even a quasi-emperor like old Taoist Chiu had been killed, but a peerless saint like Underworld Child had escaped unscathed. This was undoubtedly inconceivable. But thinking about it carefully, Lin Sun vaguely guessed that underworld child's escape was related to the smelting god pot. Only a treasure that was boundlessly miraculous could possess such unimaginable might. Treasure boy, I really look forward to meeting you next time. Lin Sun smiled, no longer thinking about it. When he looked over, Shun Ji, Madame Mu, Ling Xiaozi, and the other old monsters all had strange expressions, unable to conceal the shock between their brows. Especially when they looked at Lin Sun, it was as if they were staring at a monster. Yes, a monster. In the game of 9 palaces, Lin Sun hid his killing move outside the game, making Ling Xiaozi, who had the reputation of the number 1 Dao Tattoo Grandmaster of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, sigh in admiration, admitting his inferiority. This made the old monsters realize that Lin Sun was a peerless genius who could surpass the ancients and dazzle the contemporaries in the field of spiritual tattoos, and his future was bound to be limitless. But after the battle with Underworld Child, they found that this kind of understanding was too one-sided. Lin Sun not only had a superb attainment in spiritual tattoos, but even his own combat power could be said to be against the natural order. Peerless true saint realm, and also created his own method, firmly suppressing Underworld Child. Even in the entire ancient Desolation realm, throughout the ages, how many people could be on par with Lin Sun? From then on, in the eyes of the old monsters, Lin Sun was completely different. Therefore, when they learned that old Taoist Chiu and Underworld Child came together for revenge, they did not hesitate to stand up for Lin Sun. But what made them all feel inconceivable was that from the beginning to the end, Lin Sun didn't need to intervene at all. He alone settled the crisis. Even the means Lin Sun showed made them palpitate and tremble. A spiritual tattoo grandmaster who suppressed Ling Xiaozi, a peerless true saint who suppressed Underworld Child with his own method, and the means to control a group of terrifying creatures to fight, all of this actually happened to Lin Sun alone. Who could remain calm? The entire Yangguan was silent at this moment. The old monsters who witnessed all of this in the dark were all silent, their hearts surging and tumbling, unable to calm down for a long time. In particular, the death of old Taoist Chiu brought them too much stimulation and shock. That was a quasi-emperor who had been stationed in the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass for countless years. In his lifetime, who knew how many enemies died tragically in his hand. But such a brilliant quasi-emperor was killed just like that. Was it Lin Sun's fault? Not really. Old Taoist Chiu came for revenge. He was arrogant and domineering, and he didn't put a junior like Lin Sun in his eyes at all. If he was wrong, then it was old Taoist Chiu who asked for it. However, when they thought that a figure like old Taoist Chiu died just like that, they couldn't help but feel a little pity and sigh. Little friend, you don't have to be on guard against me. I'm not the same as those idiots. Otherwise, I wouldn't listen to your order to kill that little thing. Thousand Feather Sword swayed, his whole body as red as sunset, glowing with a misty and magnificent luster. His voice was as sonorous as a sword, but when he talked to Lin Sun, he seemed quite gentle. Little thing? Lin Sun's eyes were filled with surprise. Old Taoist Chiu was such a powerful quasi-emperor, but in the mouth of Thousand Feather Sword, he became a little thing. Thousand Feather Sword said with undisguised disdain in his voice. In the ancient times 100,000 years ago, I had already reached the realm of quasi-emperor. I have been dormant in the mulberry forest for countless years, and only needed an opportunity to step into the realm of emperor. How could that little thing compare with me? He paused for a moment and sneered. Of course, perhaps you think I'm blowing my own trumpet. But even if we're comparing the time and age of this little fellow, when I was born, this little fellow's ancestor probably hadn't even appeared in the world. In the distance, Shun Ji, Ling Xiaozi and others couldn't help blushing with shame when they heard this. They were regarded as old monsters by the people of the world, but it was clear that in front of a living fossil like Thousand Feather Sword, they were indeed a group of juniors. Although they were also quasi-emperors, the depth of cultivation and the level of combat power were like heaven and earth, simply incomparable. Even if not to mention this thousand-feather sword, like the bronze ants and green dragon that appeared before, they were obviously a group of extremely ancient and terrifying creatures. Little friend, I finally understand why Golden Cicada asked us to come here. Suddenly, there was a trace of strangeness in Thousand Feather Sword's voice, and even a rare excitement. In this magnificent ancient battlefield, there are many breaths left behind by real emperors. Each breath, for us, is comparable to a supreme good fortune. In the end, Thousand Feather Sword was even in a trance. It's ridiculous that the bronze ants and the green dragon still hate Golden Cicada. These fools don't know that Golden Cicada pointed us to a way closer to the Emperor realm. Chapter 1670. When Thousand Feather Sword Flower's voice sounded, this place became silent. Lin soon found it hard to calm down. Imperial Pass Great Wall, from the ancient times until now, towering over the front lines, undying. Back then, Divine Secret Pavilion's elder Een had said that this city was built by a group of emperors gathering stars from outer space. It stretched across heaven and earth, like an eternal natural moat barrier, defending against enemies. From ancient times until now, it had the illustrious reputation of Ancient Desolation's #1 natural moat, the place where emperors stopped. This city stretched on endlessly, full of scenes of creation. Chaotic energy pervaded the air, stars swirling about, just too majestic and majestic. When Lin soon first arrived, he immediately sensed that this city was covered in unmatched restrictions, filled with the aura of an emperor, dominating the world. Only, Lin soon didn't expect Thousand Feather Sword Flower to actually view this place as the great path of Yang Pass that was close to the Emperor realm, feeling excited and deeply moved because of this. The group of old monsters felt rather complicated inside. They had guarded this Imperial Pass Great Wall for who knew how many years, so they obviously knew that what Thousand Feather Sword Flower said wasn't wrong. This place indeed had the auras of many Emperor Realm experts imprinted on it. It was just like in this Yang Pass, there was a forbidden area that was like primal chaos, silver lightning flickering within. A strand of the aura of Heartless Demon Emperor remained until now, still missing his wife to this day. Shunji, Ling Xiaozi and the others had also wondered if they could figure out some profound mysteries that would be beneficial to cultivation from these Emperor Realm auras, moreover tried more than once. But in the end, they all failed. It was to the extent where when someone tried to forcefully refine a strand of Emperor Realm aura, it was as if they had violated a taboo power, directly dying on the spot. From then on, no one in Imperial Pass dared to have any ideas about Emperor Realm aura. And now, Thousand Feather Sword Flower clearly planned to do this. With its eyesight, could it be that it couldn't tell that these Emperor Realm auras weren't that easy to refine? Or perhaps it had other methods. Right at this time, Thousand Feather Sword Flower gently shook its petals. A strand of a terrifying aura that was filled with the might of an Emperor Realm suddenly flashed out from extremely far away in the sky. It was merely a strand, yet when it appeared in this expanse of the heavens and the earth, it caused the figures of all the old freaks to stiffen while a chill ran down their spines. They felt as if a calamity was about to descend upon them, and they felt terrified and helpless. The ice leaf in Lin Sun's palm glowed with a strange luster. Suddenly, the horrible breath of the Emperor Realm was absorbed into his meridians. At the same time, Lin Sun only felt that there was a wisp of obscure, mysterious and unimaginably horrible Emperor Realm aura in the ice leaf in his palm. Thousand Feather Sword Flower's voice carried a wisp of surprise when he saw this, and he spoke with excitement. See that? That's the key to approaching the Emperor Realm. Whoever can grasp it will be able to refine and comprehend the mysteries of the Emperor Realm. All the old monsters breathed heavily and looked at the ice leaf in Lin Sun's hand with blazing eyes. Some of the old eccentrics who had been secretly observing the situation were also visibly moved. Not only could an ice leaf seal a terrifying creature like the thousand-feather sword flower, but it also possessed the miraculous ability to absorb the aura of an Emperor Realm expert. What kind of miraculous treasure was this? It was no wonder that Shunji, Ling Xiao, and the others were shocked and moved. As a quasi-emperor, who would not desire to ascend to the martial Emperor Realm one day, overlook the heavens, and stand above all saints? It was just that it was too difficult to become an emperor. In the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, there were countless quasi-emperors stationed there, and there was no lack of amazing and tyrannical figures. But until now, no one had touched the door of the Emperor Realm. Therefore, when such an ice leaf appeared, for these old monsters, it was like seeing the hope of reaching the Emperor Realm. Who wouldn't be tempted? At this moment Lin Sun's face changed slightly, staring coldly at the thousand-feather sword flower. Are you also going to learn from that little ant, divert the trouble to someone else and kill with a borrowed knife? The thousand-feather sword flower hurriedly explained, Little friend, with me here, who would dare to harm you? I was just too excited before, so I said some things I shouldn't have said. After a pause, it became murderous. If little friend is not assured, I will kill all the juniors here. The murderous aura shocked the world, and the nearby old monsters suddenly woke up, such as Madame Mu, Shunji, Ling Xiao, and the others, all couldn't help showing a look of shame. Previously, they were also greedy and almost lost their reason. Well, you'd better go back. Lin Sun's expression was uncertain. Whether it was the bronze ant, the green flood dragon, or the thousand-feather sword flower, none of them were easy to deal with. Their minds were treacherous and unpredictable, so Lin Sun had to guard against them. After all, these terrifying creatures were all existences used to become emperors, lacking in strength, means, and wisdom. If he completely believed their words, he might play himself to death. Unexpectedly, the thousand-feather sword flower didn't resist or defend himself, but said in a gentle and serious tone, Well, it's normal for little friend to be vigilant. I will go back first. If there is something stupid to trouble you, or if you need other help, you can come to me. Swish. Before Lin Sun made a move, the thousand-feather sword flower turned into a ray of colorful light and took the initiative to plunge into the ice leaf. Advance by retreating, Lin Sun's expression was uncertain again. After a while, he took a deep breath and regained his composure. No matter what the thousand-feather sword flower planned to do, when he saw Mr. Shen, he would hand over the ice leaf according to the advice of the golden cicada youth. As for what would happen in the future, it had nothing to do with him. In short, for Lin Sun, the ice leaf was like a double-edged sword, and he didn't have the ability to control it at present. A little carelessness might cause him to be cut. So, it was better to send this thing out as soon as possible. After putting away the ice leaf, Lin Sun wanted to say something, but when he saw the complicated expressions on the faces of Shunji, Ling Xiaozi, Madame Mu and others, he couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Seniors, I'm a little tired today. I'll go back and have a rest first. Lin Sun cupped his hands and said, Little friend. Madame Mu took a deep breath and said, What happened today is really incredible. I intend to light the Emperor's breath beacon fire and tell the news to Mr. Shen as soon as possible, so that he can take charge of the overall situation in person. What do you think? Lin Sun was stunned, and his heart was filled with warmth. The meaning of this sentence was self-evident. Today, old Qiu was dead, and so many things had happened. The most important thing was that everyone in Yangguan knew that Lin Sun had an unpredictable ice leaf in his hand. At this time, it was undoubtedly the most beneficial for Lin Sun to ask Mr. Shen to take charge of the overall situation. Thank you, Senior. Lin Sun saluted seriously. Madame Mu revealed a smile. Go and have a good rest. Also, be careful of those horrible creatures in your hand. Lin Sun nodded and hurried away. The mountain rain is coming, and the Imperial Pass is not peaceful? Ling Xiaozi let out a long sigh. In the bronze hall that originally belonged to Mr. Shen, Lin Sun sat cross-legged on the ground, staring at the ice leaf in front of him, lost in thought. Back in the mulberry forest, the golden cicada youth took away a group of quasi-emperors with supreme means. For example, the Emperor of Xiao Empire, the Empress Zhao Tailai, the Dean of Green Deer School, for example, Wu Jiuchong, Zhu Tianxing. There was also the blood-colored moth named Fei Lan, and the blood lotus ancestor riding a white bull and looking like a child. At the same time, there were also a group of quasi-emperors suppressed in this ice leaf, such as the thousand-feather sword flower, the green flood dragon, the bronze ant, and so on. Lin Sun still clearly remembered what the golden cicada youth had said before he left. If there is a chance in the future, take this thing to the frontline battlefield. At that time, if the quasi-emperors sealed in this leaf want to be completely freed, they can only atone for their crimes and fight for the ancient Desolation region. At that time, Lin Sun agreed without hesitation. The reason was very simple. The golden cicada youth's action was for the entire ancient Desolation region. That kind of broad-mindedness and boldness reminded Lin Sun of the Taishan Sword Emperor, Xingjia Holy Buddha, Battle Emperor Wuyang, and other great figures of the primitive age. All of them were open-minded and had the heart to help the world. Only by atoning for their crimes can they be freed. Otherwise, will they always be restricted by the ice leaf seal? If so, giving this treasure to Mr. Shun can be called a blessing and not a curse. After thinking for a long time, Lin Sun let out a long breath. Now, he just had to wait for Mr. Shun's return. Songhai Pass. This was regarded as one of the three most important strongholds of the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass. Several months ago, the forces of the 8 regions gathered together to launch an attack against the Songhai Pass. However, with Mr. Shun, Gu Liangxiu and other quasi-emperors overseeing it, no matter how fierce the enemy's attacks were, they were all defeated outside the pass, unable to advance an inch. On this day, the beacon tower of the Songhai Pass suddenly lit up with an emperor's aura. Almost immediately, a piece of news reached Gu Liangxiu's hands. Old Taoist Chiu has been killed, the whereabouts of the underworld child are unknown, and the 4 ink dragon lions have also been killed. Lord Gu Liangxiu, please come to Yangguan quickly. When he finished reading the news, Gu Liangxiu's face suddenly darkened. A terrifying power spread out, startling the heavens. His figure was thin, and he wore linen clothes. His long hair draped over his shoulders, and his appearance was simple and firm. His eyes were as deep as the vast ocean. Old Taoist Chiu was powerful, and all these years, he had always worked hard for Gu Liangxiu. He could be said to be loyal and devoted, but now he was killed. Moreover, this grievous news happened in the Imperial Pass. Gu Liangxiu stood up, and with an indifferent expression, he ordered, "Prepare the teleportation formation, I am going to Yangguan." His voice was calm, but there was a soaring killing intent spreading out. At the same time, a piece of news also reached Mr. Shun's hands. After reading it, he couldn't help but look strange. Old Taoist Chiu died in Yangguan? What was going on? Before this, Mr. Shun hadn't heard anything about it. But not long after, Mr. Shun inquired about the news. Only then did he know that this bloody incident was caused by a confrontation between the underworld child and Lin Sun. For a moment, Mr. Shun couldn't help but be stunned. After a while, he made a decision and said, "Give the order, I am going back to Yangguan." Chapter 1672. Inside Yangguan, the atmosphere was strange. Since Lin Sun arrived here, it could be said that no one cared about him, because the old monsters stationed here all regarded him as an insignificant junior. Who would care about him? It was even to the extent that very few people knew his name. It was not deliberate contempt, but that they really didn't care. But now, in the vast Yangguan, as long as one was not deaf, who didn't know Lin Sun's name? In the game of 9 palaces, Ling Xiaozi, as the first Taoist tattoo grandmaster of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, admitted defeat in front of Lin Sun. In the battle with the Dark Child had lost all face and fled in defeat. The game of chess proved that although Lin Sun was a junior, he already had a foundation that no old monster could ignore. And in the game of chess, Lin Sun showed talent and combat strength, which proved that his pursuit of the Great Way was also unparalleled, and his future achievements were bound to be limitless. Who wouldn't care about such a junior? If that was all, it would not have shocked these old monsters in Yangguan too much, because as the king of sages or quasi-emperors, they didn't need to care too much about these things. No matter how amazing Lin Sun's talent and foundation were, in terms of realm, there was too much difference between them. Even if Lin Sun could achieve great achievements in the future, that was a matter of the future. But when old Taoist Chiu was killed, those old monsters in Yangguan could not remain calm at all. A junior, with the trump card in his hand, killed a quasi-emperor whose combat strength was enough to rank in the top 10 of Imperial Pass. Who dared to ignore it? Looking at the whole Yangguan, there was no one who could confront old Taoist Chiu. Even old Taoist Chiu was no match for Lin Sun, let alone them? Now that things had come to this, who dared to treat Lin Sun with the attitude of a senior master? Especially when they noticed the magic and terror of the ice and snow leaf in Lin Sun's hand, the state of mind of those old monsters in Yangguan completely changed. There was greed, shock, and irrepressible desire. In Yangguan, perhaps Madame Mu, Shun Ji, Ling Xiaozi, and others would regard Lin Sun as a friend and would not do anything dirty. But the others might not be the same. All of this was because of the frost leaf in Lin Sun's hand. For those old monsters, it was like a fatal temptation that made them have an irresistible desire. Fortunately, perhaps it was because they were afraid of the terrifying might of the thousand-feather sword flower that those old fellows in Yang Pass could only forcefully restrain the greed and desire in their hearts, and they didn't dare make a move rashly. But because of this, the atmosphere of the entire Yang Pass became strange and subtle. The best proof was that there were a lot of eyes outside the Bronze Hall where Lin Sun temporarily lived. There were also many old monsters who came to visit him for various reasons. Fortunately, all of these visits were blocked by Ling Xiaozi, Madame Mu, and the others. However, their hearts were still somewhat heavy. Today, Lin Sun was like a torch in the dark, attracting countless moths. If some fearless moths couldn't control the greed in their hearts and pounced forward recklessly, the consequences would be hard to say. At the same time, Shun Ji and the others were also worried whether Lin Sun would have the intention to kill them and use violence against violence after he noticed all this. In this case, it would undoubtedly be a disaster rather than a blessing for the entire Great Wall of the Imperial Pass. An innocent man gets into trouble because of his wealth. The hope of getting close to the road to Emperor is enough to make any quasi-emperor go crazy. Ling Xiaozi sighed. He was all too clear about the value of the frost leaf in Lin Sun's hand. The existence of the quasi-emperor realm was not an otherworldly god. Most opportunities and treasures in this world would perhaps not attract their attention at all. But the frost leaf was an exception. Even Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji, and Madame Mu couldn't help but care about such a treasure full of supreme temptation. Under such circumstances, the change in the atmosphere of the entire Yang Pass was not surprising. Right now we can only wait for Mr. Shun to come back and take charge of the overall situation. Madame Mu sighed faintly. Although Lin Sun did not leave his house, he could keenly perceive all of this. Since the beginning of his cultivation, he had experienced countless dangerous things. How could he not know how much trouble the existence of the frost leaf would provoke? However, Lin Sun was not afraid. Even if he did not borrow the power of those terrifying creatures, he still had other trump cards in his hands, but he was not willing to waste them on such things. It was not worth it. However, in order to avoid trouble, Lin Sun could only live in seclusion for the time being, not going out at all to avoid the limelight. He spent all his time and energy on cultivation. The treacherous and subtle atmosphere of Yang Pass did not last long. On the third day after old Taoist Chiu was killed, the atmosphere in Yang Pass changed along with the rumbling of a teleportation formation. Because Gu Liangziu had come. It was unknown how many quasi-emperor experts were stationed on the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, but only Gu Liangziu alone could be called the number one on the Great Wall of Imperial Pass. His prestige and strength, no matter where he appeared, was bound to become the focus of attention. Obviously, this time Gu Liangziu came because of old Taoist Chiu's death. Otherwise, with the war at Songhai Pass so tense, how could Gu Liangziu deign to come here? When Gu Liangziu walked out of the teleportation formation, many old monsters in Yang Pass were alarmed and came to greet him. For a time, Gu Liangxiu's side was like the moon surrounded by stars, making him look like a ruler, incomparable power. Shun Ji, Ling Xiaozi, Madame Mu and the others also came. When they saw this scene, their hearts all felt heavy. They did not expect that before Mr. Shin came, Gu Liangziu was the first to arrive. One could imagine how furious old Taoist Chiu's death made Gu Liangziu feel. Tell me everything that happened in Yang Pass recently. Gu Liangziu was dressed in hemp clothes, his long hair scattered, his figure tall and majestic, his face simple and firm. As soon as he arrived, he gave an order. His words were not forceful, but they gave people an overwhelming pressure. In addition, order that young man named Lin Sun to come see me. I will give him a quarter of an hour. After a quarter of an hour, if he does not come, I will go see him myself. The scene immediately became restless. Many old monsters revealed a look of joy. Gu Liangxiu's arrival was obviously to severely punish Lin Sun, the younger generation. There were also many people who were worried that Gu Liangxiu would target Lin Sun as soon as he arrived. If a conflict broke out, the consequences would be absolutely unimaginable. Ling Xiaozi took a deep breath and said quickly, Shun, go with Madame Mu and tell him the news of Gu Liangxiu's arrival. Be sure not to let him act impulsively. Also, don't let other old things approach. I am afraid that someone will take the opportunity to make trouble. Shun Ji and Madame Mu nodded in unison and were about to act immediately. But at this moment, Gu Liangxiu's eyes swept over like lightning and he said in a deep voice, You stay here. No one can leave without my order. Shun Ji and the others all changed their faces. Obviously, Gu Liangxiu was not ignorant of what happened in Yang Pass, but he came prepared. In his heart, he clearly regarded them as Lin Sun's accomplices. At the same time, Gu Liangxiu ordered, Xingfeng, Nie Tu, you two go to inform Lin Sun. Remember, don't use force, lest others say that I bullied a younger generation. Immediately, two people stood out. One was sturdy and rough-looking, his muscles as if cast from bronze liquid, his body filled with a terrifying iron-blooded aura. The other was thin like a bamboo pole, like a weak scholar, waving an iron fan in his hand. The former was called Xingfeng, and the latter was called Nie Tuesday. They were both famous quasi-emperor generals under Gu Liangxiu, each more terrifying than the other. Seeing this, Ling Xiaozi's expression changed again, and he couldn't help but say, Brother Gu, Lin Sun is just a junior, why do you need to make such a big fuss? Gu Liangxiu glanced at him indifferently. Which junior in this world dares to kill a quasi-emperor? Ling Xiaozi, I respect you for making great contributions to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass these years, so don't make things difficult for me. Ling Xiaozi was about to say something, but Gu Liangxiu waved his hand. Don't say anything else, otherwise don't blame me for not giving you face. His words were tough, leaving no room for negotiation. At this time, Xingfeng and Nie Tu had already begun to move, leaving the scene. When Ling Xiaozi saw this, his expression became gloomy and unsightly. If not for him wanting to avoid further conflict, how could he possibly pay attention to these trivial matters? Did they really think that Lin Sun was easy to bully just because he was a junior? Oh, that ice and snow leaf is really that miraculous? An old monster transmitted in a low voice. When Gu Liangzu heard this, he couldn't help but reveal a strange expression. Correct, that treasure is miraculous and unfathomable. If we can leave this treasure in the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, it will be able to display unimaginable effects in the future. Someone spoke, his gaze burning. This sentence immediately moved quite a few people. If the ice and snow leaf was left behind, then these old monsters would similarly have a chance to approach that path to becoming an emperor. Gu Liangzu's eyes flickered, sweeping his gaze over the others. Do you all also think this way? Many people nodded. A black-robed elder with a wizened face and graceful bearing even more directly spoke, saying, Sir Gu, in my opinion, if Lin Sun agrees to hand over this treasure, the mistakes he made before can be pardoned. Gu Liangzu snorted coldly. What did old Qiu do wrong, yet he was cruelly killed by this child? Are we going to let this child off just because of a treasure? The black-robed elder hurriedly said, He can be spared from death, but he cannot escape punishment. We still hope to give this child a chance to redeem himself. When he hands over the treasure, we can imprison him for 1,000 years as punishment. The other old monsters also spoke one after another, treating Lin Sun as a junior who had made a great mistake but could still be forgiven. Of course, the premise of forgiveness was that he had to hand over the ice and snow leaf. Absurd. Seeing this scene, Shunji and Madame Mu were so angry that their chests heaved up and down, their expressions ugly. Ling Xiaozi couldn't control the anger in his heart, shouting, What crime did Lin Sun commit? How could he be regarded as a criminal by you all? Do you all really think that old Qiu's death was all Lin Sun's fault? For the sake of a treasure you invert black and white, using such a dirty trick to deal with a junior, you all, don't you want your face anymore? His voice was like a clap of thunder, resounding through the entire place. Chapter 1675. Ling Xiaozi's words revealed the inner thoughts of those old monsters, making many people look gloomy. Ling Xiaozi, what do you think we are? Aren't we doing this for Lin Sun's good? Someone scolded. Humph, as far as we know, you and Lin Sun are not related at all, but now you defend him like this. Don't tell me that you want to win Lin Sun's favor and take the ice and snow leaf for yourself? Someone speculated coldly and maliciously. Alas, we are all fellow practitioners, why get angry over a junior? Ling Xiaozi, old Qiu was killed by this lad. Doesn't he need to pay some price? Some people tried to smooth things over, but their words were still aimed at Lin Sun. Seeing this, Ling Xiaozi was so angry that he trembled all over. For a chance to approach the Emperor realm, these old things didn't even care about their face. There's no need to say more. Can't you see that these guys have long been occupied by greed? Gu Liangzu's arrival is just a chance for them to take action. Madame Mu said coldly, You can't dissuade such people at all. Ling Xiaozi sighed, full of disappointment. I'm just very disappointed. I didn't expect these old things to become like this because of a treasure. Madame Mu was silent. Knowing a person's face but not his heart? No. It was because of greed. At the same time, in front of the bronze hall where Lin Sun temporarily lived, Xingfeng and Nie Tu, two quasi-emperors, appeared out of thin air. Where is Lin Sun? Come out quickly, Lord Gu Liangzu wants you to see him. Xingfeng's cold voice rumbled into the hall. Nie Tu smiled and said in a gentle voice, Don't be afraid, little friend. We don't have any malicious intent. However, if you don't cooperate, Lord Gu will come to see you in a quarter of an hour. At that time, the consequences will be hard to say. In the hall, Lin Sun opened his eyes, his pupils as deep as an abyss. Gu Liangzu had arrived before Mr. Shen, which made Lin Sun realize at once that old Qiu's death had angered Gu Liangzu. I'm not free. Lin Sun refused without hesitation. Gu Liangzu might be Imperial Pass No. 1, possessing tremendous prestige and power, but what qualifications did he have to order him around? He even said that if he did not see him within 15 minutes, he would personally come to look for him. This was no different from a threat. What did he say? Xingfeng's eyes widened in disbelief. He said he's not free. A cold light flickered in Nie Tu's eyes. This is the first time I've seen such an arrogant junior. 2 quasi-emperors came to invite him, but he was rejected. Haha, interesting. Damn it. He's clearly not accepting the face I gave him. With a gloomy face, Xingfeng was about to rush in and capture Lin Sun alive. Nie Tu stopped him. Don't forget, Sir Gu said not to use force. It won't be good to bully the weak. Xingfeng said angrily. If we just go back like this, then that is truly shameful. If we can't even invite a younger generation member, how are we supposed to establish ourselves in Imperial Pass Great Wall? Nie Tu waved the iron fan in his hand and sent a faint voice transmission. Don't forget, old Taoist Chiu was killed by this kid. Do you want to repeat his mistakes? Although he's a junior, his trump cards are not small. Xingfeng's expression didn't change. In the end, he cursed fiercely. Damn it, in a quarter of an hour, I will torture this little bastard to death. With that, he and Nie Tu were about to leave. But at this time, Lin Sun's cold voice rang out in the hall. You want to leave just like that after spewing shit? What do you take me for? Lin Sun's figure walked out of the hall along with the voice, his eyes terrifyingly cold. What did you say? Killing intent surged in Xingfeng's eyes, and a terrifying power spread out. Spewing shit? Was this the attitude a junior should have? Lin Sun's expression was indifferent as he replied seriously. I said, your mouths are too smelly. Did you eat shit? You're courting death. Xingfeng was about to explode. He attacked without hesitation. Not good. Nie Tu's expression changed. At this time, a crimson flower that glowed with demonic light swept out. Millions of misty sword chi flowed on its translucent petals, making clanging sounds. Boom! Xingfeng's palm was so terrifying that it was enough to crush mountains and rivers. But it was smashed into pieces by misty sword chi halfway. The sword chi whistled past, and Xingfeng's right arm was smashed into pieces, turning into a mist of blood all over the sky. Xingfeng was in pain and looked horrified. What kind of horrible creature was this? Boom! Thousand feather sword flowers swept gently, and the overwhelming sword chi poured out, like a peerless sword god attacking with immeasurable power. Xingfeng was also a fierce character, comparable to old Taoist Chiu. Otherwise, Gu Liangzi wouldn't have kept him by his side all the time. But under the attack of Thousand Feather Sword Flower, no matter how hard he tried, his defense was broken inch by inch, and his body was pierced by the boundless sword chi. Finally, with a loud bang, he was pressed to the ground by the sword chi. His flesh was badly mutilated, and his face was beyond recognition. It was extremely miserable. Nie Tu's face changed dramatically, and his hair stood on end. He could no longer keep calm and cried out involuntarily, "This, clang, 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 clang." The sound of the sword was like a mighty army, and the murderous spirit was monstrous. Without saying a word, Thousand Feather Sword Flower launched an attack on Nie Tuesday swish. Nie Tu fled without hesitation. Originally, they thought it was absolutely a piece of cake to invite a junior, and even if they were refused, they didn't use force. It was just because Xingfeng scolded him a little. In Nie Tu's view, this was normal. Couldn't he vent his dissatisfaction after being refused by a junior? But Nie Tu never expected that this young man, whom he regarded as a junior, would be so strong and domineering. He didn't put them, the emperor to be, in his eyes at all. This made Nie Tu angry at that time. If he hadn't been afraid of Lin Sun's trump card, he would have attacked him. But when he saw that Xingfeng was suppressed in one fell swoop, Nie Tu was completely awakened, and finally realized that Lin's trump card was so terrifying. Therefore, when the Thousand Feather Sword Flowers attacked him again, Nie Tu didn't even think before fleeing. Unfortunately, even old Taoist Chiu couldn't escape, let alone Nie Tuesday accompanied by an earth-shaking roar. Nie Tu's figure was knocked out of the void. Before he could stand firm, he was submerged by the dense tide of sword chi. Rumble, the sword chi raged like a storm. In a flash, Nietu was also suppressed to the ground, his body covered with sword wounds. His flesh was badly mutilated, and his bones could be vaguely seen. Blood gathered on the ground to form a scarlet pool. Lin Sun watched all of this indifferently. He watched as the two quasi-emperors, who had been swaggering around and had their eyes on the top of their heads, were suppressed to the ground in a few breaths' time without the strength to struggle. However, he felt no pity for them. But, to his surprise, Thousand Feather Sword Flower didn't kill them this time. Otherwise, Xingfeng and Nye Tu would have been dead. "Why did you keep them alive?" Lin Sun asked. Thousand Feather Sword Flower said, "If you kill them, you will only be hated by others. It's better to keep them alive. As long as it can serve as a deterrent and prevent people from looking down on you, it's enough." Lin Sun smiled faintly. "So, you are doing this for my own good? If you say that it's purely for little friend's sake, that's not entirely true. I just want little friend to appreciate my kindness." Thousand Feather Sword Flower's tone was gentle and serious. "The more you appreciate my kindness, the better it is for me. At least, even if you fear and guard against me, you can't kill me." Lin Sun sneered, "With my current strength, do I dare to kill you, who is only one opportunity away from the Emperor realm?" Thousand Feather Sword Flower sighed. "You may not be able to, but the leaf left by Golden Cicada can. So, how can I do my best to help you?" Lin Sun was very sure that this was the truth, but he didn't know what Thousand Feather Sword Flower was thinking. "Why do I want you to kill these two people?" Lin Sun suddenly asked. Thousand Feather Sword Flower said without hesitation, "Then kill them. They are just two useless little things. It doesn't matter if they die." Swish. As it spoke, it began to move. Its petals swayed, scattering misty sword chi. "Wait," Lin Sun said. Sure enough, the Thousand Feather Sword Flower immediately withdrew without any hesitation or complaint. If they didn't see it with their own two eyes, no one would dare believe that such a terrifying being would so willingly and loyally listen to the orders of a junior. However, Lin Sun's expression was a bit uncertain. He really couldn't understand Thousand Feather Sword Flower's thoughts. This old monster was too obedient, never revealing the slightest abnormal behavior. On the ground, Xingfeng and Nye Tu were dying, their hearts drowned in fear, unable to speak at all, because the aura of Thousand Feather Sword Flower had been firmly suppressing them. Taking a deep breath, Lin Sun looked at Thousand Feather Sword Flower and said, "I don't care what intentions you have in your heart. It won't be long before I leave, and you and those guys sealed in the leaf will be left in the Great Wall of Imperial Pass. To tell you the truth, no matter how obedient you are to me now, it is impossible for you to get anything from me in the future." Thousand Feather Sword Flower smiled. "I have already guessed it, but it doesn't matter. As long as you appreciate my kindness, it is enough." From beginning to end, there was no trace of disappointment or other emotions. Lin Sun couldn't help but wonder if he was too cautious and sensitive. For a moment, he couldn't help but fall into silence. Thousand Feather Sword Flower stood on one side, its petals sparkling and translucent, fiery red like sunset, flowing with misty sword chi, mysterious and strange. In the end, Lin Sun sighed. He couldn't figure it out, nor could he guess. Looking at Thousand Feather Sword Flower beside him, he suddenly asked curiously, "Speaking of which, you are already a quasi-emperor, why don't you show your human form? Is it disdain? Or is there another reason? Are you curious, little friend?" "Of course." As soon as Lin Sun's voice fell, Thousand Feather Sword Flower transformed into a woman in a red dress, with snow-white skin and black hair like a waterfall. As for adding more chapters, Goldfish thought about it and decided that she would add one chapter for every 1,000 followers. She would add one chapter for every 5,000 followers. She would add one chapter for every 5,000 followers. She would add one chapter on top of the normal updates. For example, adding 5 chapters would mean adding 5 chapters on top of 2 chapters for a total of 7 chapters. At present, the number of followers of Goldfish's WeChat official account is about 30,500. Those who haven't followed yet, please open WeChat and search for the official account Xiaojinyu233 and add your followers. Goldfish will take a screenshot of the data and post it in the book review section as a guarantee of adding more chapters. My friends, if you want to see more chapters, then follow me. Many a little makes a mickle, and there will definitely be more chapters. Chapter 1677. Her red dress was like fire, her fine black hair like a waterfall. This was a peerlessly beautiful woman that was filled with a bewitching aura. Her skin was crystalline and snow-white like sheep fat, her beautiful eyes were suffused with strands of a dreamlike sheen, and her red dress fluttered in the wind, causing her figure to seem graceful and slender. Her beauty was undisguised, burning like flames. No matter who saw her, they would be stunned both physically and mentally. Meanwhile, her temperament was like the ice and snow of a cliff, cold and indistinct, giving others a feeling of being aloof, inviolable. Even though Lin Sun had seen many stunning beauties over the years, he couldn't help but be stunned. What was even more inconceivable was that this 1,000-feather sword flower, who killed without batting an eye, was actually a woman. Little friend, you seem to be very surprised? The 1,000-feather sword flower red-dressed woman spoke, her voice gentle, tinkling and sweet-sounding, making her ice-cold and aloof temperament carry a warm spring-like aura. How can I not be surprised? I finally understand why I can't see through your thoughts. A woman's heart is like a needle at the bottom of the ocean, it really is not fake. Lin Sun sneered. He really didn't expect that the bewitching sword flower he was vigilant against, even to the extent where he didn't hide his emotions, was actually such a cold and otherworldly beautiful woman. Little friend, you will understand why I did this in the future. The red-dressed woman smiled, her cherry lips curling into a bright arc, her pearly white teeth sparkling. That smile seemed to be able to hook away one's soul. Lin Sun restrained his thoughts, looking into the distance, saying, "It's going to be a quarter of an hour soon." The red-dressed woman's fair fingers gently twirled a strand of hair, looking pensive. Yangguan was extremely large. Even though it was a stronghold of Imperial Pass, it was actually comparable to a world. Stars circulated nearby, all of them seeming rather unremarkable. Time passed bit by bit. Gu Liangxiu, who had been waiting here since he walked out of the teleportation formation, gradually had a layer of coldness between his brows. The atmosphere also became oppressive. This child is actually so rude. What kind of figures are fellow Taoists Xingfeng and Ye Tu? Can't they even invite a junior? Someone said coldly. Could there have been an accident? There were also people who were bewildered. Who could forget the bloody scene of old Xiu being killed? Although Lin Sun was a junior, who dared to treat him as a junior? Now that Lord Gu Liangxiu is here, would he still dare to commit murder? In my opinion, this kid clearly doesn't have the slightest thought of repentance. I suggest that we must punish him severely this time. For a time, many indignant voices sounded. This caused Gu Liangqiu's expression to become even more icy cold and indifferent. Ling Xiaozi was anxious in his heart. This time, if Lin completely offended Gu Liangxiu, the consequences would be, I'm afraid that even Mr. Shun wouldn't be able to handle it, right? Ling Xiaozi, you've seen it as well. I've already given him enough face and a chance, but it's very obvious that this little fellow doesn't plan on giving me face. Gu Liangqiu's words were stiff, and his eyes were suffused with a frightening light. Since that's the case, then I can only make a trip myself. As he spoke, he stepped forward and teleported away. The spirits of the other old freaks couldn't help but be refreshed when they saw this, and they followed closely behind him. Hurry up and stop them. We can't let any more killing happen. Ling Xiaozi was shocked. He was very clear that Lin Sun seemed to be easy to talk to, but in fact, He had a firm and unyielding character. It was impossible for him to lower his head to Gu Liangchu. "Let's go." Madame Mu, Shunji, and the others also couldn't stay any longer and moved one after another. "They're here." In front of the bronze hall, the woman in red spoke. Her black hair fluttered in the wind, and her face was extremely beautiful. There was no trace of emotion on her face. As soon as she finished speaking, boom! In the distance, the void suddenly exploded and spread out like a tide. A majestic and imposing figure appeared out of thin air like a god. Dressed in linen, with long hair hanging loosely over his shoulders, an unsophisticated and firm face, and a pair of eyes as vast and deep as a turbulent ocean. It was Gu Liangchu. In an instant, his gaze fell on Lin Sun, and his eyes revealed deep disdain. He was just a peak true saint. So what if he had created his own method? In front of him, he was still as weak as an ant. When his gaze fell on the woman in red beside Lin Sun, Gu Liangchu's pupils suddenly shrank. His intuition told him that this woman was not to be trifled with. When he saw Xingfeng and Ye Tu suppressed on the ground and badly mutilated, Gu Liangchu's face suddenly darkened. Divine light burst out of his eyes, and his heart was filled with rage. This time, he had specially told Lin Sun not to use force when he gave the order. But obviously, an accident had happened. Hualala immediately after, the void trembled, and one old monster after another appeared in the field. Soon, there was a burst of exclamations. When these old monsters saw the miserable Xingfeng and Ye Tu suppressed on the ground, they couldn't help but change their expressions. Did Lin Sun really dare to be so ferocious to this extent? This was more than just not giving Gu Liangchu any face. It was obvious that he didn't take Gu Liangchu seriously at all. Especially when Ling Xiaozi, Shunji, and Madame Mu saw this scene, their hearts sank. The worst thing had inevitably happened. There was no need for any reason at all. Even if Lin Sun was in the right, Gu Liangchu was destined not to let this matter go. However, what puzzled them was who the woman in red was. Could it be that she was also a terrifying existence sealed in the ice and snow leaf? Lin Sun, Lord Gu Liangchu came here to take charge of the general situation, to quell the effects caused by old Qiu's death. But you, as a younger generation member, you act viciously and viciously, your methods cruel, aren't you a bit too savage? An old monster shouted angrily. Youngster, you have already made a great mistake. Listen to this old man's advice, hand over the ice and snow leaf, take the initiative to admit your guilt to Lord Gu. Otherwise, there might not be a place for you in Imperial Pass today. Another person's voice was cold. We didn't mean to make things difficult for a younger generation member like you, but look at what you have done. Old Qiu was killed by you, Xingfeng and Ye Tu. These two fellows were also seriously injured by you. Do you still have any Imperial Pass in your eyes? Do you still have any of us elders who guard the front lines for ancient Desolation region? Someone berated angrily. When he heard these accusations and reprimands, Lin Sun couldn't help but laugh, his gaze cold. When old Qiu came to deal with me, I didn't see any of you stand out to uphold justice. If that was the case, then it would be one thing, but you all actually want to fight for old Qiu's sake, see me as a sinner, don't you feel shameless? A single sentence made the faces of quite a few old monsters fall. I respect you all as seniors, guarding the front lines, indeed establishing great contributions for ancient Desolation region. However, if you all can't distinguish between right and wrong, wishing to suppress a younger generation like me, then I apologize, I will no longer treat you with the respect of seniors. Even though Lin Sun's voice was calm, it was powerful and resounding. A black-robed elder said coldly, "Are you sure you really want to refuse to repent, make life difficult for all of Imperial Pass? Even you all dare represent the entire Imperial Pass Great Wall?" Lin Sun sneered, not hiding his ridicule at all. While speaking, he saw Ling Xiaozi, Shunji, and Madame Mu all give him looks, clearly anxious and worried. Seniors, today's matters already have no leeway. These old things really think I don't know what they are thinking. It is nothing more than the ice and snow leaf in my hands. Since they don't want face, then I obviously won't give them face either. Lin soon transmitted sound, informing Ling Xiaozi and the others of his attitude. In that instant, Ling Xiaozi and the others all sighed inwardly, feeling helpless and anxious. If today's matters became too big, then the consequences would definitely be severe. Suddenly, Gu Liangxiu spoke coldly, his voice oppressing everyone present. Youngster, old Daoist Qiu has guarded this place for 7,344 years, killing 61 quasi-emperors and outer emperors, even more so saving the lives of who knows how many fellow Taoists. This type of figure didn't die under the hands of the enemy, but was cruelly killed by a younger generation like you, yet you still believe that you are innocent, that you are not wrong? Quite a few people revealed sentimental expressions, most likely feeling sympathy for the death of a rabbit. Gu Liangxiu's eyes released divine radiance, his voice becoming increasingly cold and oppressive. Also, Xingfeng and Nye Tu before you, in terms of what they have done for the ancient desolation region, how can they be compared to a younger generation like you? Yet now they have been seriously injured by you, suffering humiliation. This place was silent, not even Ling Xiaozi or Shun Ji able to refute this. It was because what Gu Liangxiu said was the truth. Lin Sun sneered. Just because one's contributions are great, one can be lawless, act unscrupulously? Just because one's contributions are great, one can suppress and humiliate me at will? What kind of bullshit reasoning is this? Gu Liangxiu's face suddenly fell. Without us bleeding and sweating on the front lines, can a younger generation like you rise up safely in the ancient desolation region? Not only are you ungrateful, but you are also so cold-blooded, selfish, and arrogant. What's the use of keeping you alive? Lin Sun sneered. Isn't it just a competition of contributions? Then I might as well tell you that in this battle of the 9 regions, I, Lin Sun, served the ancient desolation region, suppressed the 8 regions, and helped the ancient desolation region to finally turn the situation around and win an unprecedented victory, washing away the shame of our predecessors. Let me ask you, what qualifications do you have to compete with me for contributions? Boom. As soon as Lin Sun's words fell, many old monsters showed a look of shock, as if they couldn't believe it. The ancient desolation region won this battle of the 9 regions? Before this, they had never heard of such news. What shocked them even more was that according to Lin Sun's words, the victory of this battle of the 9 regions was inextricably related to his contributions. They even couldn't believe it for a while. After the shock, Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and Ling Xiaozi believed it immediately, because they knew very well how powerful Lin Sun's combat capability was among the peerless true saints. Such a young man, in the 9 regions battlefield, was definitely a peerless figure who could lead his group. Sensing the change in the atmosphere, Gu Liangxiu's eyes also narrowed, and then he sneered. The ancient desolation region won the battle of the 9 regions. Of course, it's a great thing, but it's not destined to be your contribution alone. Young man, there should be a limit to boasting. Otherwise, if you are exposed, wouldn't you be slapping yourself in the face? Many old monsters' eyes flashed, and they couldn't help but nod. Seeing this, Lin Sun couldn't help but show a touch of sarcasm at the corner of his mouth. These old monsters might have high realms and strong combat capability, but they didn't know the news of the battle of the 9 regions at all, and wishfully thought that he was bragging, who on earth was ignorant. Chapter 1679. At this moment, Lin Sun was still angry. Perhaps it was because from the very beginning, he greatly respected every expert stationed at the front lines, which was why after so many things happened, he was disappointed and angry. Because of Underworld Child, old Qiu came aggressively, wanting to kill him at the slightest disagreement. Because of old Qiu's death, Gu Liangxiu, the #1 expert of Imperial Pass, also came to denounce him, viewing him as a sinner. Because of an ice leaf, those old monsters became greedy and covetous, so they didn't care about right or wrong, pointing their spear at him. Because he was a junior, no one would believe his words. Because Lin Sun already didn't feel like understanding, put himself in their shoes, and didn't feel like respecting them. Why could you talk about your glorious military achievements, talk about how much effort you put into the ancient desolation region, and do whatever you want? Simply laughable. I killed old Xiao. Suddenly, the red-dressed woman spoke. Her eyes swept across everyone, her beautiful face carrying an ice-cold arrogance. Her voice was no longer as gentle as when she spoke to Lin Sun, but bone-chillingly cold. Guarding this place for more than 7,000 years, only killing 60 or so quasi-emperors. You are simply trash, your death is not to be regretted. His words were filled with undisguised contempt. The expressions of Gu Liangxiu and the others changed, darkening. Old Taoist Qiu was a famous master, but he was humiliated like a piece of trash. How could they not be angry? On the other hand, Shun Ji and the others instantly came to an understanding. It turned out that this gorgeous, and aloof woman in a red dress was surprisingly that strange sword flower. And these two on the ground, they couldn't even take a single strike from me. Even if they were humiliated, they deserved it. The red-dressed woman's words were not polite at all. Even though she was alone, she looked down on the heavens, looking down on everyone with arrogance. Her words shocked and angered many old monsters. Of course, they also guessed the red-dressed woman's identity, feeling restraining fear. Otherwise, they would have already taken action. You want to support this child? Gu Liangxiu said with an ice-cold expression. He already knew that this woman was definitely one of the terrifying existences sealed in the ice leaf. This made him even more uneasy. Was that ice leaf really so magical? Support. The red-clothed woman spoke casually. No, I'm just following orders. If that wasn't the case, then I wouldn't bother wasting my breath. If you annoy me, then I'll just kill you. The corners of many old monsters' lips twitched. Sure enough, whoever controlled the ice snow leaf could command the terrifying existence sealed within it. This caused them to drool with envy, shock, and fear. After a moment of silence, Gu Liangqiu looked at Lin Sun and said, I can give you a chance. After I know the news of the battle between the 9 regions, I can forgive you at my discretion. But the premise is that you must hand over the leaf in your hand first. Lin Sun sneered and laughed out of extreme anger. In the final analysis, it's just for the treasure. Do you deserve to forgive me? Killing intent flashed past Gu Liangqiu's eyes, his expression cold. I don't know how many experts are stationed in Imperial Pass Great Wall. Could it be that you think that just by relying on what you have, you can act without regard for law and natural morality? The meaning behind his words was clear. No matter how formidable a terrifying figure like the red-clothed woman was, how could she possibly stop the attacks of countless quasi-emperors? Lin Sun said coldly, At the very least, I know that in this imperial pass, there is no way you, Gu Liangqiu, can cover the sky with one hand. The many experts stationed here might not necessarily listen to your orders. I advise you not to think too highly of yourself. Boom. Gu Liangqiu was completely enraged. His long hair fluttered about, his aura shaking the world. Countless wisps of iron-blooded killing intent surged and surged in his surroundings. The expressions of many old monsters nearby changed, their breathing suffocating. This was the power of Imperial Pass No. 1. Gu Liangqiu looked towards the red-clothed woman and said, I'll help you kill this child, let you completely free yourself from the situation of being controlled by others. How about it? This sentence made the eyes of quite a few old monsters brighten. The red-clothed woman was controlled by the ice snow leaf in Lin Sun's hands. With her arrogance and terrifying power, how could she be willing? Only, what left them stunned and in disbelief was that when faced with this proposal, the red-clothed woman refused without even thinking. Wishful thinking. Mockery and mockery were not concealed at all. Gu Liangchu's heart sank. This woman brought him quite a bit of pressure. If not for this, how could he have endured until now? Kill these two, Lin Sun suddenly said. His eyes looked toward Xingfeng and Ye Tu on the ground, his voice cold and emotionless. Pooh! Pooh! The two quasi-emperors who were already firmly suppressed on the ground died on the spot with the red-clothed woman's will. Their souls were crushed to powder, their vitality completely gone. In an instant the expressions of the old monsters here all changed. You dare! Little thing, you are so cruel! This is simply unforgivable! Furious shouts resounded through heaven and earth. The wind and clouds changed color, the atmosphere became hostile, incomparably austere. The hearts of Shunji, Ling Xiaozi and the others sunk to rock bottom. This time, it was equivalent to completely shedding all pretense of cordiality with Gu Liangchu. Kill! Gu Liangchu's face was ashen, his voice coming out from the gaps of his teeth, killing intent surging through the world. Boom! He attacked without hesitation. As he pressed his palm forward, the heavens and earth shook. The murderous intent that filled the sky gathered in his palm and fiercely slapped towards the red-clothed woman. Half-step Emperor Realm, no wonder you dare to be so arrogant. The red-clothed woman's beautiful eyes flashed with a trace of surprise. Then she also attacked. Wisps of misty sword chi appeared dreamily, like hazy misty rain sprinkling on the blue sky. It was magnificent to an extreme extent, causing one's heart to tremble. Bang! 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 Gu Liangchu's attack was crushed by the countless threads of sword chi, collapsing inch by inch. His expression changed slightly, and he did not hesitate to use his full strength as he shouted, "What are you waiting for? Kill!" Immediately, killing intent flashed in the eyes of the old monsters as they locked onto Lin Sun. Everyone knew that as long as they killed Lin Sun and snatched the frost leaf from him, everything would be easily solved. Shameless! Ling Xiaozi, Shun Ji, Madame Mu and the others could not restrain themselves any longer and attacked at the same time, killing those old monsters. Boom! 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 A chaotic battle between quasi-emperors broke out at this moment. For a moment, heaven and earth were turned upside down, the sun and moon lost their light, and the void exploded. Divine light, Taoist sound, treasure light, Taoist magic completely submerged this area. How terrifying was a battle between quasi-emperors! That kind of power alone was enough to kill any true Sage Realm expert in an instant. If it were not for the supreme prohibition covering the Yang Pass and the aura of the Emperor Realm, it would have suffered irreparable damage in an instant. If Lin Sun was involved in such a battle, he would be doomed, not to mention getting involved. Under normal circumstances, at such a close distance, even if Lin Sun dodged and escaped, he would not be able to escape the oppression of the power of quasi-emperors and would be affected in an instant. But this situation did not happen. Lin Sun stood there like an immovable rock, and no matter how the wind blew, it could not hurt him at all, because in the palm of his hand there was an ice-clear leaf. The leaf was flowing with obscure and strange fluctuations, which were unfathomable, and all the power sweeping in all directions was dissolved. Lin Sun's black eyes were cold, and killing intent surged in his heart. The woman in red was fighting with Gu Liangchu, and a group of old monsters were trying their best to rush over to kill him. Shun Ji, Ling Xiaozi, and Madame Mu, with faces full of anger, were trying to stop all this in the field. Chaos and turbulence were everywhere, and the killing intent was overwhelming. The huge Yang Pass was caught in a fierce internal fight at this moment. The strong and boiling killing intent, like lava, broke out completely in Lin Sun's heart. "You asked for it." He suddenly raised his head, his black hair fluttering, and the ice leaf in his palm emitted amazing fluctuations. Boom! A bird with snow-white wings rushed out, its clear cry shaking the 9 heavens. "If you want to live, kill those old bastards. This is your only chance," Lin Sun said coldly. the snow-white bird's body suddenly burst out with an evil spirit, and it flapped its wings and soared into the sky, like an incredible light. Puff! The next moment, a pair of giant claws tore off the arm of an old monster, who screamed. Buzz! The icy leaves emitted a strange fluctuation, and then an enormous black ape, a broken and blood-stained bronze spear, an enormous python that was covered in golden dragon scales, and a violet mink that was coiled with dazzling lightning bolts rushed out one after the other. In an instant, more than a dozen terrible creatures that had been dormant in the mulberry forest for countless years all appeared. The whole world was oppressed by the terrible power emerging from their bodies, wailing and trembling. Countless exclamations rang out in the field. Many old monsters had changed their faces in horror. No one had expected that the ice leaf in Lin Sun's hand could seal so many terrible creatures. It was like opening the gate of hell. Even Gu Liangxiu, who was fighting with the woman in red, felt a chill in his heart at this moment, and his face changed wildly. As far as he knew, the ice leaf in Lin Sun's hand only sealed a green jiao, a bronze ant, and a demonic flower. Moreover, both the green jiao and the bronze ant were disloyal to Lin Sun and very resistant to his control. But who would have thought? How could such a terrible thing happen? Shunji, Madame Mu, and the others were all shocked and thought that Lin Sun was obviously annoyed. He had completely ignored everything. Moreover, they did not expect that there were so many terrible creatures sealed in the magical treasure in Lin Sun's hand. However, just when they were about to dissuade him, Lin Sun had already uttered a word in a cold voice: "Kill!" As if the ruler had issued a decree, the black giant ape, the golden dragon python, the purple marten, and the blood-stained spear, all the terrible creatures set out. The combat power of each of them was not inferior to that of the bronze ant and the green jiao. Each of them was an ancient creature that could become an emperor with only a great opportunity. No one knew how long they had been dormant in the world. When they attacked together, the scene could be imagined how terrible it would be. Boom! The world was completely chaotic. The sun and the moon lost their light and the sky was dark. The terrible creatures were like cruel and cold gods of death, running amok in the field. Thanks to 326-720-41 and Mr. Shen for their gifts. In addition, the current number of followers of this public account is 30,848. Another 500 followers will be added. Chapter 1681. Hong. The giant black ape moved through the air, its arms reaching out like pillars that supported the heavens. With a simple and crude swing and smash, a fist that was like a small mountain directly sent an old monster flying. His body directly exploded in midair, a rain of blood flying, body and spirit erased. Pa! Even a weak Saint King Realm chicken dares participate in this type of confrontation? Truly an eyesore. The giant black ape spat out fiercely, its face full of malevolence and disdain. Chong! On the other side, the damaged and blood-stained bronze spear flashed and tore through the sky. The tip of the spear was suffused with a cold and terrifying jet-black light, and it reflected a strange and ghastly pale face with a strange bloody glow in its eyes. This spear was the most mysterious and unfathomable in the mulberry forest. Even though it was damaged, it seemed to possess intelligence, possessing a wave of terrifying willpower. Pung! In that instant, the heart-protecting mirror in front of an old monster exploded, his chest pierced through by a spear. His body was lifted up, releasing a miserable scream of alarm. At the same time, in other directions, the golden python dragon, snow-white profound bird and lightning sable all erupted with heaven-overflowing divine might, each more terrifying than the last, each more ferocious than the last. In reality, in the eyes of these terrifying creatures, they indeed didn't attach any importance to these old monsters stationed in Imperial Pass. One had to understand that as early as 100,000 years ago, they already hid in the mulberry forest, wholeheartedly wishing to seize the Emperor Ascension opportunity left behind by the 10,000 Tribulation Great Emperor. Meanwhile, the experts stationed in Imperial Pass Great Wall might have quite a few half-Emperor realm existences, but regardless of whether it was their backing or power, compared to these living fossils' terrifying creatures, they were completely insignificant. It was precisely as Thousand Feather Sword Flower said in the beginning, these Imperial Pass Great Wall experts were nothing more than a group of younger generation. Moreover, these old monsters weren't all half-Emperor realm experts, there were some Saint King realm experts as well, making them seem even more unbearable. Honglong. The battlefield was chaotic and turbulent, Dao light pouring down like a sea, rumbling sounds like thunder from the 9 heavens. Heaven and earth were trembling, the void completely chaotic, all types of terrifying irregular scenes appearing one after another. There were gods and devils roaring, saints weeping blood, there were also stars sinking and moons falling, mountains and rivers collapsing. Such a terrifying scene could be said to be world-shocking, and if it were to erupt at any other place, then it would be sufficient to destroy an area of 5,000 kilometers and obliterate everything. After all, this was a battle between half-emperors, a group of old monsters from Imperial Pass Great Wall and a group of terrifying creatures from the Mulberry Forest. This type of battle was rarely seen even in Imperial Pass Great Wall. No! Damn it! Fight it out with them! Furious roars rang through the world. The expressions of every single Imperial Pass old monster were ashen and sinister, incomparably ugly. They had thought that with Gu Liangxu's help, Lin Sun would bow his head and hand over the ice leaf. Never had they thought that the situation would be so serious. Merely a single leaf had actually sealed over 10 terrifying beings. This was simply like a bolt from the blue, and it caused those old freaks to be caught off guard. On the other hand, Gu Liangchu was obstructed by the woman in a red dress. Not to mention displaying his divine might, even escaping seemed to be extremely difficult. He was Imperial Pass No. 1, fighting on the front lines until now. It was unknown just how many great enemies he killed, yet he still hadn't fallen. But now, he was obstructed by the woman in a red dress. However, this wasn't because Gu Liangchu was too weak. Back then, someone like old Daoist Qiu was also killed by the woman in a single strike. Gu Liangchu was able to fight against the woman in a red dress until now, so his combat strength could already be said to be terrifying. Unfortunately, a peak half-emperor like Gu Liangchu was still just one person in the end. The other half-emperors didn't have his ability. Kill. The giant black ape released a roar, the roar shattering the void, making heaven and earth tremble. It was terrifyingly ferocious, rampaging through the battlefield like a great demonic god. The other terrifying creatures weren't inferior in the slightest. Under such a massacre, 3 quasi-emperor experts died one after another in just a moment, and 7 saint kings were destroyed in body and soul like weeds. Between heaven and earth, the wind and clouds were gloomy, a rain of blood pouring down. When a saint died, there would still be sounds of mourning, blood covering the sky, let alone the fall of a half-emperor realm expert. High up in the sky, flowers of blood scattered down, withering in the void. There was a surging sound of the great Tao surging like a song. In the distance, Lin Sun's black hair fluttered, his black eyes cold, his expression calm. He indeed didn't have the ability to participate in a battle of this level, and he couldn't even see the power used by those half-emperor realm experts. After all, the disparity in strength was too great. But all of this didn't matter. With the ice and snow leaf here, even if Gu Liangchu had 3 heads and 6 arms, he was still doomed to be powerless to reverse the situation. People can't live for their sins, greed causing mischief, this is the punishment. This time, Lin Sun was completely enraged. He was already being suppressed by others, how could he care about a flood that overflowed the heavens? Perhaps this battle would cause many old monsters to fall, and for the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, there would undoubtedly be heavy losses. But Lin Sun didn't care anymore. Driven by greed, when these old monsters attacked him without hesitation, Did they think of this kind of consequence? Did they consider the overall situation? Just because they were stationed here and had military merits, they could bully a junior? What a joke. In the beginning, if it wasn't for the overall situation, how could Lin Sun have endured until now? If it wasn't for this front-line battlefield, how could he have immediately come to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass after leaving the Nine Regions battlefield? Originally, this ice and snow leaf was going to be gifted to Mr. Shun, to be left in the Great Wall of Imperial Pass. What was laughable was that these old things, for the sake of greed, didn't even care about their face, didn't even care about right and wrong. Lin Sun was furious, but even more so felt disappointment. He wholeheartedly served the ancient Desolation Region camp, couldn't say that he helped the world, couldn't say that he worked hard for all living beings. But at the very least, he always used his own strength to contribute, to do some things for the ancient Desolation Region. If not for this, in the Nine Regions battlefield, how could he rebuild the city of Tao Protectors, do everything he could to fight the 8 regions? If not for this, how could he agree to the Golden Cicada youth's request without hesitation, bring the ice and snow leaf to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass? But now, what welcomed him? It was inverting black and white, wantonly suppressing, because of greed, not distinguishing right from wrong, wanting to kill and seize treasures. This was the source of Lin Sun's coldness, disappointment, and anger. It was just as he said before, in terms of contributions. He, Lin Sun, alone flattened the 8 regions, leading the ancient Desolation region to victory in the Battle of the Nine Regions. Among the heroes of the world, from past to present, who could compare to him? No one. It was because in the previous Battle of the Nine Regions, the ancient Desolation region camp had always suffered crushing defeats, being suppressed, humiliated, trampled, unable to raise their heads. But now, a group of old monsters, relying on their hard work and contributions, could unscrupulously slander, suppress, order, and target him. This, how absurd, how laughable. Boom. In the battlefield, the battle became more and more intense, blood pervading the air, killing intent shaking the world. There were constantly quasi-emperor old monsters dying. Their bodies were torn apart, their chests were pierced, their spirits were shattered, or their heads were directly twisted off. Bitter, bloody, cruel, ghastly. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and Ling Xiaozi had already withdrawn from the battlefield. They naturally couldn't help those terrifying creatures deal with Gu Yangtzu and the others. However, when they saw their comrades, who had once bathed in blood and fought together against foreign enemies, fall one after another before their eyes, they couldn't help but feel their hands and feet turn ice-cold, their hearts sinking into an incomparably fierce struggle, suffering great torment. Could they blame Lin Sun for being too callous? No. From beginning to end, Lin Sun had always been the target of suppression. Otherwise, Shun Ji and the others wouldn't have acted together just now, helping Lin Sun stop those old monsters. Greed, it is simply like a devil in our hearts, harming others and ourselves. Ling Xiaozi sighed sorrowfully. Little friend, can you be lenient? Shun Ji couldn't bear it any longer. This boorish and heroic quasi-emperor, at this moment, his eyes were red, his voice carrying a kind of guilt, as well as a kind of pleading. This request was originally a bit excessive for Lin Sun, but Shun Ji really couldn't continue watching. The casualties were too heavy. It was still not a small blow to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, even more so making the foreign enemies laugh at them. Little friend, please stop. Madame Mu also spoke anxiously. In the battlefield, apart from Gu Liangtzu who was still fighting fiercely with the woman in red, more than half of the other old monsters were already dead or injured. The few that remained were also bitterly struggling, about to be unable to hold on any longer. Lin Sun was silent for a moment, took a deep breath, and asked, Seniors, do you think that I have done wrong? Shun Ji, Madame Mu and the others all stared blankly, then immediately shook their heads, each of their expressions complicated, not daring to meet Lin Sun's gaze. This matter, of course, wasn't Lin Sun's fault. From beginning to end, he had never done anything wrong, always passively resisting. They really disappointed me. Lin Sun spoke again, his eyes looking at the distant Gu Liangziu, his expression already calm. I really want to know, if the foreign enemies of the 8 regions take out an opportunity to become emperor, will these old monsters also choose to betray out of greed, side with the foreign enemies? Will they dare to destroy the Great Wall of Imperial Pass for the sake of becoming emperor? These words were earth-shattering, too striking. The expressions of Shun Ji and the others all changed, their hearts sinking to rock bottom. Even though Lin Sun's words were a type of hypothesis, after seeing the bloody scenes today, who wouldn't care? Indeed, even a piece of ice and snow leaf could make these old monsters go crazy, recklessly targeting a junior. If the foreign enemies also took out such an opportunity, these old monsters, who could restrain the greed in their hearts? However, out of respect for seniors, I can give them a chance. As he spoke, Lin Sun raised the ice and snow leaf in his hand, his eyes looking towards the battlefield. Enough, all of you can come back. Those terrifying creatures clearly didn't have enough. They didn't care how many quasi-emperors they killed, or how serious the impact it would bring to the Great Wall of Imperial Pass. But they didn't dare to disobey Lin Sun's words. Whoosh! That blood-soaked bronze spear was the first to withdraw, swiftly rushing into the ice and snow leaf. Immediately after, the golden python dragon, lightning sable, snow-white profound bird and the other terrifying creatures also returned one after another. From start to finish, they didn't encounter any obstructions, because their opponents had long been slaughtered until their courage was about to burst, about to collapse. Added one update in advance tonight. Thank you to Mr. Shin, Blue Feather Breeze and the others for their tip. The number of followers of the WeChat official account is currently 31033. When it breaks through 3200, I will continue to add updates. Chapter 1683. In the field, all the old monsters were scared out of their wits and on the verge of collapse. Witnessing those horrible creatures being put away by Lin Sun, these old monsters only had one feeling: they had survived a disaster. They breathed heavily and their expressions changed constantly. The greed in their hearts had long been replaced by fear, and they looked at Lin Sun with incomparable scruples and dread. So far, among the old monsters who participated in this action, 4 quasi-emperors had died, and 7 saint kings had their souls destroyed. The casualties could be said to be disastrous. No one doubted that if the battle continued, the casualties would only be greater. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, Ling Xiaozi, and the others felt relieved, gratified, grateful, and indescribable grief. Those dead old monsters did not die on the battlefield, but died in the internal strife because of their greed. It was really regrettable. However, no one expected that when the woman in red intended to stop and retreat, Gu Liangziu would not let her go. Boom! His expression was livid, and he had a deranged bearing. He held a silver halberd in his hand, and he seemed like an enraged god of war as he pursued and attacked the red-clothed woman relentlessly. This made many people change their expressions. They realized that Gu Liangziu was obviously unwilling to give up. He was extremely angry and did not intend to stop. "Do you really think I'm afraid of you?" The woman in red's beautiful eyes flashed with a frightening cold light. Her black hair fluttered in the wind, and around her, hundreds of millions of hazy sword chi flowed like a misty rain. In a flash, Gu Liangxiu's offensive was defeated, and he was suppressed by the woman in red. She walked in the void, her red robe rolling like waves of blood, and her sword chi flowing freely. She was like a magnificent and enchanting peerless sword master. Her aloof, cold, and fierce demeanor was enough to amaze the world. Lin Sun did not stop her. It didn't matter if Gu Liangziu was risking his life out of anger or if he had other motives. Since he did not intend to retreat, how could Lin Sun take the initiative to ask for peace? Retreating before was already the bottom line of what he could tolerate. Otherwise, if it were not for Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and the others, he would not have chosen to stop today's battle. Boom! In the sky, Gu Liangziu was already in a terrible situation. He was completely suppressed, and the boundless and hazy sword qi enveloped him, causing him to pale in comparison. Everyone could tell that even if it was Imperial Pass number 1 person, Gu Liangziu, in a frontal clash, he was still clearly a bit inferior to that red-clothed woman. If this continued, Gu Liangziu might very well die as well. Many people's hearts tightened. Lord Gu, since it has come to this, why do you still insist on killing? Shunji could not help but shout. Shut up! Gu Liangziu's expression turned even more livid. His eyes were burning with rage. If he admitted defeat today, wouldn't it be equivalent to admitting that he was inferior? He, Gu Liangziu, personally descended upon Yang Pass, wishing to punish a younger generation, yet in the end, he was dejected and depressed, returning in low spirits. If news of this got out, what face would he have left to establish himself in Imperial Pass? Brother Gu, what's the harm in each of us taking a step back? We're all members of the realm of ancient desolation. If we keep fighting like this, won't our enemies laugh at us? Ling Xiaozi also spoke, advising with kind words. All of you are afraid of that little thing. Could it be that you think I will be the same as all of you? Gu Liangziu roared, and his expression became ferocious. These old things actually advised him to lower his head and admit defeat. They were simply evil. It's clearly your own fault, but for the sake of face, you would rather die than repent. There is no lack of such people in this world. Lin Sun sneered. Little thing, I'll teach you a lesson later. Gu Liangziu's expression was grim. At this moment, he seemed to have completely gone mad, without any reason to speak. Enough. Gu Liangziu, don't you feel ashamed? Suddenly, a loud shout sounded in the distance, like thunder, shaking the field, making many people tremble all over. They saw a thin man in a scholar's robe, with big sleeves fluttering, striding over from afar. His bearing was like a towering mountain, and his aura was as strong as the vast ocean. Mr. Shen, Shunji and other old monsters were all refreshed, as if they had found their backbone. At the same time, a strange light flashed in Lin Sun's black eyes. Back then, Mr. Shen wore coarse linen clothes and had an ordinary temperament. In a short and ordinary shop, he taught Lin Sun the way of stone carving. Now that they met again, Lin Sun found that Mr. Shen's true style was so lofty and unparalleled. Ashamed? Haha, you old guy, you came to see me make a fool of myself, right? Since you came to the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass, have you ever taken me seriously? Now that I'm in trouble, it would be strange if you don't take the opportunity to hit me when I'm down. Gu Liangziu laughed to the sky, but his expression was particularly ferocious. Mr. Shen's arrival not only didn't make him calm down or restrain himself, but also seemed to be stimulated, becoming more and more manic. Mr. Shen's eyes swept over the field, and he couldn't help but sigh. Stop. Considering that we are on the same path, don't make things too difficult for me. On the same path, it meant that everyone was working for the ancient desolation realm, and they were on the same path. Making things too difficult for you? During these 3 years, just how many times have you made things difficult for me? Gu Liangziu became more and more furious, as if he was venting, no longer caring about anything else. This time, I only wanted to punish a younger generation, yet you personally jumped out to oppose me. Aren't you also targeting me? Mr. Shen was just about to say something, but Gu Liangziu already roared. There is no need to say anything else. Today, why don't we use this chance to completely settle things? Hong. Suddenly, his aura changed, a strand of blood energy rushing out from the crown of his head. Heavens! Cries of alarm sounded. That unremarkable strand of blood energy turned into a streak of scarlet multicolored light, piercing through the sky dome, making several of the stars in the skies above Emperor City fall, explode. Emperor Dao True Blood. This caused everyone to be stunned and shocked. All those who stepped into the Emperor realm were the most powerful existences under the heavens, enough to shock past and present, grasp unmatched might. Not to mention a strand, even a drop of Emperor Dao true blood was filled with the might of the Emperor realm, and its secrets were sufficient to illuminate the heavens and crush all. However, it wasn't that easy to obtain Emperor Dao true blood. Because it was branded with the true might of the Emperor realm, every single drop could be said to be a priceless treasure that was rarely seen in the world. Yet now, Gu Liangxiu had gone mad and fused the Emperor Dao true blood into his body. Obviously, he intended to disregard everything and fight desperately. Damn it! The expression of the woman in red changed slightly while deep fear flashed through her beautiful eyes. The strength of the Emperor Dao true blood was comparable to the might of a true Emperor realm expert, and even a half-step Emperor realm expert could only avoid it and not dare go head-on against it. Bang! In an instant Gu Liangxiu's aura rose steadily, and it was simply like the arrival of a true Emperor realm expert. It caused many old freaks to feel suffocated, and their hearts trembled as if they were ants that were targeted by a dragon in the sky. The invisible pressure was too terrifying. "Little bastard, I'll kill you first." Gu Liangxiu's voice rumbled and reverberated in all directions. He took a step forward, and an overwhelming and terrifying power swept towards Lin Sun. Normally, it was impossible for the woman in red to block it, and choosing to avoid it was the wisest decision. However, at this moment, she did not hesitate to attack with all her strength and stood in front of Gu Liangxiu. Buzz, hundreds of millions of misty sword chi with a strange and magnificent luster spread out, covering the sky and covering the sun. The profound sword intent and the terrifying sword power pierced through the 9 heavens and 10 earths. But in just an instant, it was smashed by Gu Liangxiu's palm. Countless sword chi exploded with a bang, and it couldn't stop Gu Liangxiu at all. Even the woman in red was sent flying by the force of this palm. She was like a lonely boat that was thrown away by stormy waves. The woman in red's expression changed greatly. In the field, exclamations rang out incessantly. Everyone was shocked and almost couldn't believe their eyes. At this moment, Gu Liangxiu was much stronger than before. A little great spirit can move 1,000 miles like a gust of wind. Mr. Shen had arrived with a solemn expression. He suddenly flicked his sleeve, and then a strand of great spirit that was like a cool breeze carried the might of the heavens and the earth, the might of the mountains and rivers, and the essence of the grand Tao whistled out. It was swift and unrestrained, and it was shapeless. "Move aside." Gu Liangxiu roared furiously as he swept his halberd horizontally, and it slashed through the world and carried the might to obliterate the world. Bang! Mr. Shen's full-force strike was similarly easily swept away, and his figure staggered back from the impact while his expression couldn't help but change. On the other hand, Gu Liangxiu had seized this opportunity to launch his attack. He seemed to be furious, yet he'd actually made a decision a long time ago. The reason he disregarded everything and fought to the end was partly to maintain his dignity, but most importantly, it was to seize the icy snow leaf. He was already at the half-step Emperor realm, and he only lacked a critical factor to step foot into the threshold of the true Emperor realm. When he found out that the icy snow leaf could allow him to get close to the true path to the Emperor realm, he'd been determined to obtain it since a long time ago, and he couldn't afford to lose it. Just like how those terrifying beings in the mulberry forest had bitterly endured for countless years for the sake of seizing the critical factor left behind by the Emperor realm. The more an expert like Gu Liangxiu, who was infinitely close to the Emperor realm, was, the more stubborn he was. It wasn't out of greed, but for the sake of pursuing the path to the Emperor realm. As for the obstructions he'd encounter along the way, it was bound to be impossible for him to shrink back. This was Gu Liangxiu's true thoughts. As for insanity and rage, they weren't sufficient to affect the mind and will of a figure like him. Yet now, he was about to succeed. After Lin Sun died, not only would he be able to seize the icy snow leaf, He'd even be able to take control of the woman in red and the other terrifying beings. It could be said to be killing two birds with one stone. Die, you little bastard! As he shouted explosively, Gu Liangziu didn't hesitate to strike a killing blow. Even if Lin Sun summoned all the terrifying beings within the icy snow leaf, it was bound to be impossible to resist the might of a half-step Emperor Realm expert who'd activated the true Emperor Realm blood. No matter if it was the woman in red or Mr. Shun, both of them had been pushed back. At this moment, it was already too late even if they wanted to stop Gu Liangziu. As for the other old freaks, they'd been deterred by Gu Liangziu's terrifying might a long time ago, and they were bound to be unable to stop all of this. At this instant, time seemed to have stopped, and it was dangerous to the extreme. Perhaps life and death would be decided in this instant. However, Lin Sun didn't retreat, nor did he turn pale with fright because of this, and it was even to the extent that he didn't reveal a trace of emotion. However, in his hand there was a token that had appeared out of nowhere. Chapter 1684. This was a grey domino, very inconspicuous, but it was as heavy as an ancient sacred mountain. Lin Sun could only hold it in his palm by running his strength. Boom! There was no chance for Lin Sun to react at all. In fact, under the terrible pressure of Gu Liangziu, he couldn't move at all. It felt like a piece of straw falling into the sea, about to be smashed to pieces. Shun Ji, Madame Mu, and Ling Xiaozi were all furious. Mr. Shin's face changed greatly, and his heart was in his throat. Even he didn't expect that Gu Liangziu would be so fierce and desperate. Moreover, Gu Liangziu possessed a heaven-defying treasure like the Emperor's true blood. This caught Mr. Shin off guard. The woman in red's body exuded monstrous killing intent, and her black hair danced wildly. Lin Sun had been speculating about her thoughts, but she had never really said it. If Lin Sun died, she would feel extremely regretful. Lin Sun was like a lamp that illuminated a dark room. If it was extinguished, then the whole room would fall into darkness. And she was this dark room. But just when everyone thought that Lin Sun couldn't escape this time, a wisp of obscure fluctuation quietly diffused from the domino in Lin Sun's palm. In an instant, the void seemed to be stagnant, and everything seemed to be frozen. The world fell into a strange state of stillness. It gave people the feeling that all things in the world and all the states of the world were frozen at this moment. Even Gu Liangxiu's omnipresent and extremely terrifying pressure couldn't be spared and froze there. Then, a skinny old man with a face full of wrinkles and a pair of triangular eyes appeared out of thin air. He was extremely dirty and sloppy. Boom! When his figure appeared, the strange state of stillness between heaven and earth suddenly collapsed, and everything returned to normal. But everyone felt it was inconceivable, because the appearance of the skinny and sloppy figure was too sudden. Well, the Great Wall of the Imperial Pass. Hee, it's been so long since I came here last time. The old man sighed, clasped his hands behind his back, and looked at the heroes around him as if they didn't exist. The most shocking thing was that the terrifying pressure belonging to Gu Liangziu, no matter how it attacked, collapsed and disappeared as soon as it reached the place where the old man stood. Snow melts into water, clay oxen disappears into the sea, nothing more than this. This figure was Duso, who lived in seclusion in the star-embracing sleeping moon game of the Xiao Empire in the mortal world. In an instant, Gu Liangxiu's pupils constricted. This old thing was obviously not a living being. It was merely a strand of will brand. Moreover, his aura couldn't be detected at all, as if it had been abandoned by the Grand Tao. But it just so happened that such a will brand was like a natural chasm that lay across the ages, and it was impossible to shake. This, Shun Ji, Madame Mu, Ling Xiaozi and the others were all stupefied, almost not daring to believe what they were seeing. It was already a dangerous moment of life and death, yet such an inconceivable thing had actually occurred. For a moment they were unable to react. So this kid still has a trump card. Mr. Shin's eyes lit up. Only then did he feel relieved. However, when he thought of the thrilling scene just now, even he felt a lingering fear. Indeed, Golden Cicada was right. No matter how weak the successor of Fongtsuan Mountain is now, it's impossible for him to meet with such a calamity. The red-clothed woman muttered in her heart, an extraordinary splendor rippled within her dreamy and beautiful eyes. As for the other old monsters present, they were all dumbfounded. Another unforeseen event had occurred. How many trump cards and secrets did that kid have? At the same time, Lin Sun secretly breathed a sigh of relief. When he was in the mortal world, Duso had given him a token for fear that he could use it to save his life when he encountered an unbeatable opponent in the bloodthirsty battlefield. According to Duso, this domino token could devour everything below the Emperor realm, and should not be used easily unless it was a life-or-death situation. The reason was very simple, because this token could only be used once. However, after entering the bloodthirsty battlefield, all the dangers Lin Sun encountered along the way were easily solved by Duso, so he didn't have a chance to use this token until now. But now it finally came in handy. Tut-tut, no wonder you asked me to come out. I'm suppressed by a half-step emperor when I'm just a Saint Realm expert. This situation is really too dangerous. At this time, Duso stood in the void, squinting his triangular eyes, glanced at the audience, and finally fell on Gu Liangxiu. With a kind of disdain, he sneered, "Speaking of which, this half-step emperor realm is too shameless. Doesn't he feel ashamed to fight a little kid in person?" Gu Liangxiu's face darkened and he said coldly, "Fellow Taoism, you're in the way." The opportunity was fleeting. How could he be willing to give up just like that? He had fought for a chance with the real blood of Emperor Realm with great difficulty? He had sacrificed everything and offended everyone. At this time, there was no turning back. At this time, even if there was a Buddha in front of him, he would not hesitate to kill him with all his strength. In fact, as soon as Duso spoke, Gu Liangxiu had already attacked. Boom! A silver halberd swept across the sky, like a silver dragon soaring in the sky, accompanied by a deafening sound. Just looking at it from afar, many old monsters were terrified. But facing such a terrible attack, Duso took out a dirty and greasy spoon and smashed it down casually. His action was so skillful as if he was cooking. Clang! A deafening explosion sounded. What made everyone dumbfounded was that the silver halberd buzzed and almost flew out of his hand. Gu Liangxiu's entire body shook, and he suddenly staggered back a few steps. His face was filled with shock. Was this the power that a wisp of willpower could possess? This sloppy old man, could it be that he's a true emperor? All the old monsters, including Mr. Shern and the woman in red, felt dizzy at this moment. Using a spoon, he forced back a quasi-emperor expert who had refined the power of the emperor blood? This scene was extremely strange. Even Lin Sun could not help but click his tongue. How could this grumpy strange old man be so fierce? You haven't become an emperor yet, so your struggle is futile. The real blood of Emperor Realm you borrowed is treacherous, sinister, and tyrannical. If I'm not wrong, it should be a wisp of real blood left behind by the Dark Blood Emperor when he first became an emperor. If it was the real blood left behind by an Emperor Realm expert who had reached the no form and no power stage, perhaps it would be of interest to me. The Duso sneered, and his wrinkled, skinny face was filled with undisguised contempt. It was just a few words, but to the old monsters present, it was no less than earth-shattering, and they were completely stunned. How could he identify so many secrets through the aura of a wisp of real blood? Moreover, what was the no form and no power of the Emperor Realm? All of this seemed to indicate that the Duso was very likely a real emperor, and it was very likely that he knew the Dark Blood Emperor. Otherwise, how could he know so much? One should know that this was only a wisp of his willpower. If his true body was here, how terrifying would it be? You're just a wisp of willpower, how dare you boast shamelessly? Boom! Gu Liangxiu attacked again, and his aura became even more terrifying. A wisp of blood-red light swept out from the top of his head, and it was as if the power of the Emperor realm filled the air, intimidating the universe. He brandished the halberd and charged forward. Stubbornness has turned you into a demon, and you've pinned your hopes of becoming an emperor on an illusory external object. How ridiculous! The Do-So sneered, and his movements were not slow. He suddenly took a step forward. Dong! The world trembled, and a formless and terrifying force swept out, covering Gu Liangxiu's entire body. At the same time, the Do-So stepped forward, picked up the ladle, and smashed it down. Bang, bang, bang! A series of muffled sounds rang out, and an unbelievable scene appeared. With every smash of the ladle, the power around Gu Liangxiu's body would disperse a little, and his figure would collapse and shrink a little. When his power was completely smashed and disintegrated, his figure was actually beaten until it was only 3 inches in size, and like a grasshopper, he was trapped within the ladle. No matter how he roared and howled, he could not escape from the ladle. For a moment, the whole place was silent. The old monsters all gasped and swallowed with difficulty. What kind of terrifying existence was this? A top expert of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, who even borrowed the power of the real blood, did not even have the power to struggle in front of him. This was undoubtedly too unimaginable. And what was his relationship with Lin Sun? Even Lin Sun himself couldn't help but twitch his lips. The old guy, Do-So, was just a strand of will imprint, yet he was already so powerful. Then how terrifying was his true cultivation? Inexplicably, Lin Sun thought of the words of the bloodthirsty king Zhao Tailai. This old guy is the only old monster who abandoned the Great Way and cultivated alone. Don't be fooled by his lack of cultivation in this lower world. No one can kill him. In short, Do-So's path was definitely related to abandoning the Great Way and cultivating alone, so it was no wonder that no one could see through his cultivation. Because he had long abandoned the Great Way that everyone pursued. The whole place was silent. Only Gu Liangxiu, who was trapped in the ladle, was still roaring, his voice full of anger, unwillingness and fear. It was as if even he did not expect that he would be defeated so miserably. The Do-So thought for a moment, then sighed. Killing you is easy, but keeping you alive is difficult. Fine, seeing that this is the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, I will act according to the rules of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass, and suppress you for 10,000 years first. Boom! The ladle in his hand shook, and with a grab, Gu Liangxiu was squeezed into a bead. Around the bead, there was an obscure Taoist light. Then, as if sensing something, Do-So suddenly cried out in surprise, "A strand of heartless demon emperor's will is still here? This cold killing god whose hands are stained with blood is really infatuated." As he spoke, he flicked his finger, and Gu Liangxiu, who was suppressed into a bead, suddenly broke through the air and disappeared in the vast Great Wall of Imperial Pass. Without a doubt, Gu Liangxiu was completely suppressed. This made many people sigh inwardly. The number 1 of the Great Wall of Imperial Pass had fallen to this point. How could they not sigh with emotion? Tomorrow, Goldfish will publish an analysis of the orthodoxy of Mind Mountain, and some minor spoilers on the public account.